owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino infringed Direcos de Autorenales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen del Autor Original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 651. You home yet? On the way back, Zumengyo nestled in Kinzu's arms, staring at him steadily, and the whole car was silent. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Being stared at by Zumengyo, Kinzu felt a little scared, and couldn't help but touch his face, thinking there was something dirty. No, I just wanted to look at you. Zumengyo, who was originally in a complicated mood, laughed out loud at Kinzu's actions, and temporarily broke the silence in the car. Seeing Zumengyo laugh, Kinzu was relieved, and tightened his hand around her waist, and said with a smile, "What's so good about me? It's not the first time we meet. It's different." Zumengyo shook her head and said with emotion, "It feels like every time I see you, you're different." Really? Kinzu looked at the review mirror in front of him with some disbelief, and felt that there was no change. Really? Zumengyo nodded with certainty. She could clearly feel that every time she saw Kinzu and every time she called him, her feelings about this man would become clearer. It was a very inexplicable feeling, but it really affected her. Including the fact that he came to this strange city from his hometown thousands of miles away, it was also because of that feeling. Kinzu looked at Zumengyo's serious expression and didn't say anything. He also had some guesses in his heart that it seemed to be because of the spirit energy. In fact, Kinzu's guess was right. Because the spirit energy was baptizing his body all the time. Although he couldn't feel it himself, and the spirit energy couldn't directly change a person's appearance, it was still very easy to change a person's temperament and aura. For example, David, Jefferson, Douglas, and even Prince Hunter later. Do you think anyone can be friends with the prince? Don't joke. If it weren't for the effect of the spirit energy, which made him give people a very different and trustworthy feeling, even if he saved Hunter, Hunter would not give him a good face. This is the pride of a prince. Of course, Kinzu didn't know all this. He also felt that since he went abroad, it seemed that everyone he met was easy to talk to. Moreover, the white people he met did not look down on China and the yellow race as others described. Although Kinzu felt a little strange about all this, he attributed it to the fact that he was a rich man. But he didn't think about it. There are so many rich people in the United States. How many of them can handle the relationship with so many people? The Porsche Cayenne drove smoothly on the Intercontinental Highway. The two who hadn't seen each other for a long time also nestled in the back seat and talked about some private things. Maybe it was because Kinzu's embrace was too warm, or maybe it was because they felt tired after sitting on the plane for a long time. So, while chatting, Kinzu found that there was no sound. Looking down, the little girl was leaning on his shoulder and fell asleep sweetly. There was also a sweet smile on that delicate face. Not only that, Zumengyo, who fell asleep, seemed like a kitten, and snored slightly. Kinzu smiled softly, watching Zumengyo's charming sleeping face, and his heart was warm. He moved his body slightly and adjusted his position so that she could sleep more comfortably. Seeing this, Dale in the front seat also turned on the air conditioner in the car to prevent the two from catching a cold. There was no conversation along the way. Zumengyo had not woken up until the car entered Boston. It seemed that she was also very tired. Kinzu looked at the time. It was almost noon now, so he whispered to Dale in front, "Go to the restaurant and go back after dinner." Dale did not speak, but nodded gently. As soon as she turned the steering wheel, the Porsche drove towards the destination. A moment later, the car drove into the restaurant and directly drove into Kinzu's exclusive parking space. The doorman ran over and was about to stop him, but he saw Dale in the driver's seat, so he hurried to help take the roadblock away. Just kidding, although he didn't see if the person in the back seat was the big boss, but to let the big boss's beautiful bodyguard drive, she must have a close relationship with the big boss. When the car stopped, Kinzu patted Zumengyo's back gently. "Mengyo, wake up, let's go eat something and go back to sleep." Yes, Zumengyo, who was in her sleep, uttered a slightly cute mumbling from her nose, and then she opened her eyes in a daze and asked blankly, "Are we home yet?" Looking at her lazy appearance and listening to her mumbling, Kinzu's heartbeat accelerated a lot. Home. What a warm word. Since coming to the United States and living in the villa for so long, Kinzu has never felt the feeling of home. What he has is just a sense of unreality. That's why he was so generous to let Eva and Dale move in, and also arranged for Erica and others to move in. The purpose was just to prevent the villa from becoming so deserted. But now, Zoom and Geo just simply said, "Are you home yet?" And the sense of unreality in Kinzu's heart disappeared instantly. "We're not home yet. We're at our restaurant. Let's eat something before going home." Kinzu pinched Zoom and Geo's face gently and said doubtingly, "Oh." Rubbing her eyes, Zoom and Geo knocked away Kinzu's mischievous hand and wrinkled her nose at him in dissatisfaction. "Don't pinch my face. I'm not a child anymore. Okay, no. Kinzu laughed and opened the door to get out of the car, perfunctorily saying it without sincerity. Zoom and Geo couldn't do anything about him. She tidied her clothes and followed her out of the car. However, as soon as she left the warm car, Zoom and Geo shivered involuntarily. Seeing this, Kinzu hurriedly hugged her into his arms again and began to nag. "You didn't know to wear more clothes when you came here. I told you it was cold here. Now you're cold. I'll tell you if you catch a cold." Listening to Kinzu's muttering, Zoom and Geo snuggled on his warm chest and perfunctorily said it without sincerity. Kinzu chatted for a long time and they all arrived at the door of the restaurant. As a result, he saw that the little girl was about to fall asleep again, and rolled his eyes helplessly. "Don't sleep, let's go in, eat something and go back." "Oh, okay." Zoom and Geo forced herself to be alert and followed Kinzu into the restaurant without looking closely. As soon as she entered the door, Chenmu came out from inside and greeted her from a distance. "Boss, how come you have time to come and see me today?" Kinzu shook hands with him, pointed at Zoom and Geo beside him and introduced. "Brother Chen, this is my girlfriend, Zoom and Geo. Thank you for the reward support from It's Too Difficult to Name It. Thank you for the reward of 500 starting coins from Super Invincible and Domineering Classmate. Thank you for the reward of 588 book coins from Will Yuan. The second update today, Chapter 652 discussion about the ranch and the restaurant." Zoom and Geo was still a little dazed until she walked into the office specially reserved for Kinzu. "What's wrong, Mingyo? You look absent-minded." Kinzu sat in the boss chair, took Zoom and Geo into his arms, and his hands began to get naughty. "No, don't mess around, we're still outside." Zoom and Geo came to her senses and was about to say something when she felt the presence of the strange hands and hurriedly resisted. Kinzu also knew that this was outside, and he was not a person who was impatient, well, at least not particularly impatient. So, seeing Zoom and Geo resisting, he took his hands out and put them around her slender waist. "Then tell me, what happened just now?" Zoom and Geo did not resist this time. She sat in Kinzu's arms docilely and said softly, "I just didn't expect that you actually acquired such a large Western restaurant." As she said that, Zoom and Geo turned around and asked with a smile, "Why? Are you going to enter the catering industry?" Kinzu lay on the boss chair, shook his head with a wry smile, and asked back, "How likely do you think this is?" "This?" Zoom and Geo pondered for a moment and gave her an answer. 1% chance. "What?" Kinzu was stunned. Zoom and Geo laughed softly and explained, "I said, the chance that you want to enter the catering industry is only 1%. Touching his nose, Kinzu was a little unconvinced and asked, "Why do you say that? Can't I enter the catering industry?" "Because you are lazy." Zoom and Geo shrugged and gave Kinzu a one-hit kill. "No way, how am I lazy?" Kinzu looked at the beauty in his arms with a depressed face. Hearing Kinzu's question, Zoom and Geo's beautiful eyes narrowed into a slit, and she smiled and said, "I'm not talking about laziness, but your personality. Logically, you should be thinking about how to enjoy life now, not going out to expand your territory. No way, in your eyes, I am such a person who doesn't want to make progress." Kinzu was exposed, and he was a little angry, and his hands began to be dishonest again. "Ah, hee. Kinzu, don't make troubles." Mingyo, who was suddenly attacked, laughed out loud. Seeing that the strange hands were getting more and more excessive, she quickly begged for mercy. I was wrong, isn't it okay?" Kinzu then withdrew his hands with satisfaction, and looked at the beauty in his arms with pride. Zoom and Geo gritted her teeth at the smug expression, and wished she could bite this guy directly. The two of them played around for a long time before Kinzu settled down. Looking at the gorgeous and seductive Zoom and Geo, he said seriously, "You're right. Taking over this restaurant was just an accident. I bought it because I saw it could make money." As he spoke, Kinzu shook his head and said with a smile, "You know, I'm not the cutout to run a restaurant, so I usually leave it to Chenmu to take care of it." Apart from checking the accounts, I have basically never taken care of anything. Zhu Mengyo nodded and said seriously, I just know your ability, so I'm curious about how you bought a restaurant. Qin Zhu's forehead suddenly hit several black lines, and he stretched out his hands threateningly. Little girl, if you act naughty again, I will get serious. Zhu Mengyo immediately wilted, her little face flushed and she waved her hands repeatedly. Qin, stop it, I'm talking to you about serious business. Then tell me, if you make me unhappy, we'll just spend the night here today. Qin Zhu threatened with a smirk on his face. Okay, I'll tell you. Helplessly moving her body in Qin Zhu's arms and finding a more comfortable position, Zhu Mengyo said, you already have a ranch now, so if you want to enter the catering industry, you have a unique advantage, so this restaurant, well, it's still a goodbye. Hearing what Zhu Mengyo said, Qin Zhu nodded in agreement and said, you're right, I just realized this, especially after talking to the ranchers around, I don't want to sell the ranch's products to those middlemen. This is an inevitable result. Zhu Mengyo smiled and said, no matter where it is difficult for a production base to achieve direct sales. Do you know why? Why? Qin Zhu was a little curious. He was also very surprised. Those ranchers could obviously supply the products directly to restaurants, so why did they sell them to those meat companies? Because of the channels. Zhu Mengyo shrugged and said helplessly, it is impossible for a restaurant to consume all the output of a ranch, and if a ranch supplies several restaurants, there are not so many local restaurants. At this point, Zhu Mengyo looked at Qin Zhu. Look, there are only a few famous restaurants like Boston. Qin Zhu nodded. He had never thought of this. He thought that the ranchers were just too lazy to run. As if she noticed Qin Zhu's doubts, Zhu Mengyo smiled and explained, on the one hand, they are too lazy to run. On the other hand, it is because there are no local restaurants. If they want to run, they can only run to other places. And in other places, they must have their own supply channels, so they have to fight price wars with them. At the end, Zhu Mengyo sighed and concluded, so, they can only sell beef to those middlemen, let them sell beef to restaurants farther away, or export directly. Qin Zhu nodded suddenly, indicating that he understood. However, he was still curious, so he blinked and asked, what does this have to do with me? Zhu Mengyo's breathing suddenly stagnated, and she almost couldn't catch her breath. She rolled her eyes at this guy and muttered, you big idiot, other people have to supply several restaurants with one ranch. Can you use up all the food in just one restaurant with such a big ranch? Qin Zhu almost jumped up when he heard it, and waved his hands and said, of course, how can it not be used up? I was exhausted a few days ago. I went out to sea to fish in the heavy snow to supply the restaurant. This is the only thing for one restaurant. If there are more, I will be exhausted to death. Now it was Zhu Mengyo's turn to be dumbfounded. She muttered unconsciously in her cherry mouth, how could this be? This is not scientific. With the data analyzed by her high IQ, this situation is indeed unscientific. Just as the two were still staring at each other, there was a knock on the door. Qin Zhu bent over and opened the door. Chen Mu was standing at the door with a dining cart and a big smile on his face. Seeing Qin Zhu open the door, Chen Mu pushed the dining cart in and said politely, boss, lunch is ready. Eat first. Tell me if it's not enough. Today's third update, extra update for the crazy demon dragon god, 1/2, chapter 653. The idea of opening a branch. Seeing Chen Mu was about to leave, Qin Zhu's heart moved, and he hurriedly said, Brother Chen, come, sit down first, I have something to ask you. Chen Mu turned around with some confusion. Didn't he look like a starving ghost just now? Why is he not anxious now? Seeing this, Zhu Mengyo also guessed what Qin Zhu was going to ask, so she came to the coffee table and sat down, waiting for the two. When Chen Mu also sat down on the sofa on the side, Qin Zhu followed and asked with a smile, Brother Chen, do you think that our ranch is struggling to supply a restaurant at present? No. Chen Mu looked surprised and said, Boss, we only have one restaurant, how can we digest so many things? Don't you see how crowded the restaurant is now? I was just about to suggest that you open a branch. Qin Zhu's smile froze on his face. How could this be? With a turn of his eyes, Qin Zhu caught a glimpse of Zhu Mengyo's half-smiley eyes, and continued to ask with some reluctance, Really? Then you urged me to give up the other day for ingredients. Hearing this, Chen Mu spread his hands and said innocently, Boss, ingredients are needed, but the ingredients you gave me are enough for me to use for 1 or 2 months. Could it be that the ranch has no output in the past 1 or 2 months? Well, the ranch has not produced anything yet. Qinzu was a little speechless. Chen Mu nodded. Yes, it's because there is no output yet that I didn't say anything, but what if we wait until after the new year? With a large number of calves coming out, how can our restaurant eat them all? And if we can't eat them all, when the calves are 20 or 30 months old, who can we sell them to? Qinzu was a little embarrassed, and he felt that he couldn't ask any more questions. What kind of thing is this? It's a slap in the face. He waved his hand and said speechlessly, okay, Brother Chen, go and get busy first. Chen Mu was also a little puzzled. Looking at the boss's expression, he seemed a little unhappy. What happened? Did he say something wrong? Confused, he walked to the door. Just as he was about to open the door and leave, he suddenly thought of something, so he turned around and said, by the way, boss, what do you think about opening a branch? Qinzu's hand froze as he opened the plate. He looked at him speechlessly and said, I know about this. I'll think about it first and let you know when there is a result. When Chen Mu closed the door and left, Zhu Wenguo couldn't help it anymore and lay on the sofa and giggled. Okay, come and eat quickly. It won't taste good if it gets cold. Qinzu smiled awkwardly and opened all the plates, and changed the topic. Seeing this, Zhu Wenguo didn't continue, but restrained her smile, came over, and ate with Qinzu. After the meal, Qinzu called the waiter to take away everything. He took out a small bag of tea from the refrigerator and asked while making tea, Wenguo, what do you think we should do now if we don't want to sell beef to those damn profiteers? Zhu Wenguo sat on the sofa, rubbing her flat belly without a trace of fat, and muttered, how can it be so delicious? I'm going to get fat again if I eat so much. Qinzu made the tea, sat down next to the sofa, not on the table, and said speechlessly, Wenguo, I'm talking to you. Huh. Zhu Wenguo came back to her senses, leaned lazily on a sofa, and asked, what did you say? Qinzu had no choice but to repeat what he had just said. This? Zhu Wenguo took a sip of the hot water. The two pieces of pink color made Qinzu's heart throb. It's very simple. Didn't Chen Mu just say it? Open a branch. What? Now it was Qinzu's turn to be stunned. Open a branch. Zhu Wenguo rolled her eyes at him and repeated it word by word. Branch? Qinzu touched his chin and said thoughtfully, opening a branch is no problem, and the funds are also sufficient, but what about management? Management. Zhu Wenguo shrugged and asked, where are we now? America. What is the most abundant here? This? It should be the rich, right? Qinzu scratched his head, not quite understanding what Zhu Wenguo meant. Wrong. Zhu Wenguo decisively rejected Qinzu and said with a smile, here, there are the most professional managers. Professional managers? Qinzu muttered to himself, and suddenly realized, you mean, we're responsible for opening the store, and let the professional managers do the management? Zhu Wenguo nodded, yes, in the United States, especially in big cities like New York, there are many professional managers active there. They are mainly responsible for helping the rich to manage and operate some industries. But is this really okay? Qinzu still felt a little unsure. After all, a few months ago, he was just a small worker. How could he have come into contact with these things? Not to mention hiring professional managers, even their small manager could eat him up. Don't worry about this. Professional managers are only responsible for work. The ownership of the company is still in your hands. You just need to send a financial officer to look after it. Zhu Wenguo took another sip of tea. Seeing that Qinzu was still a little entangled, she said, it's the same as Chen Mu. Don't you manage nothing here? After saying this, Qinzu felt relieved and didn't feel so unacceptable. However, seeing Zhu Wenguo's wise look, Qinzu felt a little frustrated, so he muttered, how is it the same? Chen Mu is Chinese. Just one sentence made Zhu Wenguo speechless for a long time. Seeing the little girl's face flushed, looking defeated by you, Qinzu smiled and rushed over directly. Okay, I know what you mean. After this busy period, I will start preparing for the opening of a new store. Being pressed under Qinzu, Zhu Wenguo's breathing was a little unsmooth, and she muttered, whether you open a store or not is none of my business. I'm just here for vacation, and I have my own things to do. Qinzu was a little surprised to hear this, and asked hurriedly, didn't you say you had settled down here? Is there anything else? Zhu Wenguo took the opportunity to break free from Qinzu's clutches, tidied up her messy clothes, and explained with a smile. Settling down is settling down, but it doesn't mean I have nothing to do all day, right? Then what do you want to do? Qinzu became a little nervous. Don't just come here and turn into a strong woman again. Well, I haven't thought about it yet. Kinzu just breathed a sigh of relief, and saw Zumengyo holding her chin with both hands, lying on the sofa, and said innocently, "The current idea is to open a law firm, which will just happen to take over Shinrui's overseas business." Today's fourth update, extra update for the crazy demon dragon god helmsman, 2 halves. Chapter 654. Rabbits love carrots? Kinzu gave a stern rebuttal to Zumengyo's idea of opening a law firm. Although the little girl pouted and looked at him with displeasure, Kinzu did not change his mind. According to him, being a lawyer is so tiring, and you have to help those rich people with lawsuits. If you meet an employer who is easy to talk to, it's okay, but if you meet those difficult employers, the money won is not enough to make up for the anger you suffer. After hearing what Kinzu said, Zumengyo hesitated. According to what she saw and heard in China, some people who came to lawyers to sue did have bad tempers. She also often heard her best friend complain about how difficult the clients were. However, because she was just killing time in that law firm at the time, she really didn't take her case alone. So now that she was frightened by Kinzu, she retreated a little. Then what should I do? I can't just sit at home like this, right? Looking at Kinzu with some displeasure, Zumengyo threw the question over. Kinzu heard this and wanted to say, "Just stay at home with me, don't go anywhere, just accompany me to do things I love all day long." Fortunately, he braked the car in time, otherwise, I guess the beautiful Zhu would have to consider whether to go home immediately. Well, let's talk about it later. Let's go back first. You've been on the plane for so long, you should have a good rest. Kinzu couldn't think of any good way, so he had to use the word delay to get rid of her. After being reminded by Kinzu, Zumengyo also felt a little tired. She yawned a little and said weakly, "Okay, let's go back first. I'm so sleepy." Kinzu rolled his eyes and walked out with her. He was still complaining in his heart, "Why didn't I see you look a little sleepy just now?" After saying goodbye to Chenmu, Dale drove the Porsche Cayenne and drove to the ranch with a few people. Boston winter has changed a lot from when Zumengyo first came. Especially the piles of snow on both sides of the road and the vast plains covered with silver, which made her, who had never seen so much snow, very excited. This excitement also dispelled a lot of her sleepiness. After more than an hour's journey, Zumengyo did not sleep again. When she arrived at the ranch, it was already past 2 in the afternoon. Hearing the sound outside, Eva in the villa came out with a bit of trepidation. "Boss, you're back." This time, Eva was not as calm and composed as last time when facing Zumengyo. She was nervous all over. Even when she spoke, she used honorifics again. This feeling was like a girl who was cheating and was suddenly caught in the act. She was terrified and ashamed. Kinzu looked at Eva's appearance and shouted in his heart. With Zumengyo's eccentric personality and her smart mind comparable to a genius, it would be strange if he didn't see anything. But there was no other way now. Kinzu could only nod his head and walked into the villa with Zumengyo, who was a little too excited. Fortunately, perhaps because she was too excited, Zumengyo greeted Eva happily, and there was nothing wrong with her. Especially when she saw Daha and Xiaohe, who had grown to more than 30 centimeters tall, the excitement was even more indescribable. Daha and Xiaohe still remembered the woman who had had a brief contact with them. After circling Zumengyo twice, they did not refuse her touch. However, in terms of attitude, they were not so positive. After all, we are also dogs with status and cannot lose face like that. But unlike them, when Dado saw Zumengyo, he suddenly burst into overwhelming enthusiasm and threw himself directly into her arms, almost scaring Zumengyo. When she saw the little guy in her arms clearly, the shock immediately turned into surprise. She stroked the little guy with excitement, and said with a little excitement, "Clean, did you see that? It still remembers me. It's amazing." Kinzu handed the things to Eva and asked her to put them in her room. Then he smiled and said, "After all, you're its savior. How can you not remember it?" Hearing this, Zumengyo raised her little nose proudly, but did not say anything. She held the slightly grown little lop-eared rabbit, sat on the sofa, and looked at it carefully. It didn't matter that Zumengyo's pretty little eyebrows wrinkled immediately. "Clean, why has the little guy only grown so little after so long?" Looking at Kinzu with some suspicion, Zumengyo pouted and asked, "Don't you usually give it food? Look how thin it is." Kinzu also sat over, took the little guy from Zumengyo's arms, pointed to the corner near the fireplace, and cried out in injustice, "Look, there are so many foods over there, and there are so many varieties. How could I not feed it food?" Looking in the direction Kinzu pointed, Zhu Wenguo finally felt relieved. Well, there are indeed a lot of things: carrots, green vegetables, and carrots. The more she looked, the more wrong it seemed. Zhu did have a lot of things, several plates, but they were all carrots. What the hell was that? Why do you only feed it carrots? Zhu Wenguo glanced at Kinzu in dissatisfaction. How lazy are you to cut so many carrots and put them there? Touching his nose, Kinzu laughed twice. He did this to save trouble, so he usually cut a few carrots, and then cut a few more after the little guy finished eating. However, what does this have to do with eating carrots? What's wrong with eating carrots? Don't rabbits eat carrots? Kinzu asked with some confusion. Of course it is related. Zhu Wenguo stood up dissatisfiedly, picked up her mobile phone, and just wanted to go online, but found that she had not changed her number and could not go online at all. Kinzu saw this, hurriedly turned on his mobile phone, and handed it over. Giving Kinzu a big satisfied face, Zhu Wenguo checked the internet while explaining. You can't feed rabbits too many carrots, it will make the rabbit's stomach bad, and it will have indigestion. No way. Kinzu came over in disbelief. How is this possible? From childhood to adulthood, our teachers have taught us that little white rabbits are white and white, with two ears standing up, and love to eat radishes and vegetables. Now you tell me that rabbits can't eat carrots? Zhu Wenguo handed the phone to Kinzu and said, well, you see, it's not that they can't eat it, but they can't eat too much. Carrots have too much water, which is not good for the rabbit's stomach. A new week has begun. Please support me. If I'm not busy, Liu-un will try to update more. Chapter 655 Go to the warehouse. After finally coaxing Zhu Wenguo to sleep, Kinzu came downstairs, sat on the sofa, and stared at Xiaodadu without blinking. Although he didn't see where the little guy had lost weight, since Zhu Wenguo said he had lost weight, then he had lost weight. What he didn't expect was that such a smart person like him had been deceived by elementary school textbooks for so many years. Kinzu touched his nose and didn't think there was anything wrong with praising himself like this. You know, when they were young, the teacher taught them that little rabbits love to eat carrots. But who knew that the staple food of these little guys was actually grass? Thinking of this, Kinzu also reacted. No wonder there are so many rabbits in the ranch. It turns out that they are all here to steal food. As if noticing Kinzu's peeping at it, Xiaodadu, who was napping by the fireplace, quietly raised one eye, and then quickly closed it again. Kinzu couldn't help laughing. This is really a timid little guy. Kinzu picked up his phone and checked online. He found out that although rabbits' staple food is grass, they particularly like a kind of grass called timothy. According to the introduction on the internet, this timothy grass is very suitable as the main grass for rabbits because of its high fiber and low protein. The cellulose in the grass helps to accelerate gastrointestinal peristalsis, helps rabbits to grind their teeth while eating, and can also prevent urinary stones and overweight problems, which can be said to kill two birds with one stone. However, Kinzu stared at the so-called timothy grass on the screen of his mobile phone and studied it for a long time, and finally confirmed one thing. Isn't this a close relative of dogtail grass, kittle grass? Well, Kinzu admitted that these two grasses have nothing to do with each other. If there is a relationship, it is that they are a little similar in shape, and the name is also a little reminiscent, so many people will make the mistake. Moreover, kittle grass has high nutritional value and is suitable for livestock. It is a high-quality forage. But the role of dogtail grass is basically like a weed, and it is also harmful to crops. After learning about this, Kinzu was relieved. He was surprised at first, how come there was dogtail grass even in this American ranch? It seems that his judgment was wrong. It turned out that those mixed in the pasture were actually kittle grass. But in this case, Kinzu was a little confused. Why? Because the pasture grass in the ranch had been harvested by him, and the new pasture now did not contain kittle grass. Looking at the carrots in front of Xiaodadu, Kinzu hesitated for a long time, but still walked over decisively, picked up the carrots, and prepared to throw them away. Just when Kinzu picked up the carrots and was about to turn around, he felt that there seemed to be something at his feet. Looking down, Kinzu was startled. Xiaodadu was holding his ankle, holding his head high, opening a pair of bright eyes, looking at him pitifully. "What are you doing?" Kinzu asked subconsciously. But as soon as the words came out, he reacted, and his eyes followed Xiaodadu's gaze and focused on his right hand. "Do you want this?" Kinzu asked tentatively, putting the carrot down. Little Dadu can't speak, but its pitiful eyes have been following the movement of the carrot, and the meaning is self-evident. But you can't eat this. Kinzu pinched Little Dadu's soft ears and said with a smile, "Wait, I'll find you something more delicious later." The little guy seemed to understand what Kinzu said. The two little claws that were holding Kinzu's ankles slowly loosened, and reluctantly moved their little bodies and jumped towards the fireplace. Kinzu smiled and threw the carrot directly into the trash can. He washed his hands and went out. Of course, he was not alone, he also pulled Eva with him. As for where to go, this is also what Eva is concerned about. "Boss, what are we going to do?" Eva looked at the warehouse getting closer and closer, and her heart was pounding. Kinzu pulled her out alone, and didn't say what he was going to do, which made Eva have some wild thoughts. She was not an old lady, and she was usually with several female bodyguards, so she had no scruples when chatting. Although she was not opposed to the outdoors in the warehouse, she didn't like it very much. Especially when Kinzu's real girlfriend was still sleeping in the villa, Eva felt even more uneasy. Kinzu, on the other hand, didn't think much after hearing Eva's question, and said casually, "What, go to the warehouse to find something?" "Find something?" Eva curled her lips in her heart. What do you need to go to the warehouse to find? What else can there be there besides hay and piled up sundries? Kinzu didn't know that the pretty big foreign horse beside him had already thought of him in a crooked way. He was still a little surprised. He glanced at Eva, whose face was slightly red, and asked in confusion, "Eva, what's wrong with you? Your face is so red. Are you feeling unwell?" No. Eva waved her hands hurriedly and denied it insincerely. "I'm just too hot, too hot." Although she didn't know whether Kinzu meant that, Eva didn't dare to disobey him. It was already dangerous for her to have his real girlfriend here. If she made him unhappy again, wouldn't her family have to pack up and leave? If it were the past, she would have left, but now Eva didn't want to leave Kinzu and Tycoon Manor at all. High salary and high welfare are one aspect. Repaying kindness and making money to pay off debt are another aspect. And these two reasons are not the most important. The most important aspect is that Eva herself didn't even have the idea of leaving Tycoon Manor. So when she heard Kinzu's question, she didn't even think about it and made up a reason that she didn't believe. "Is it hot?" Kinzu wrapped the collar of his coat. How come he didn't feel how hot it was with such a cold wind? Since Eva didn't want to talk about it, he didn't ask any more questions and took Eva into the warehouse. Coming to the small utility room on the side, Kinzu found 2 sets of anti-dirty work clothes, gave one to Eva, and put on one himself. Changing clothes. Eva hadn't come back to her senses yet. When she saw the standard work clothes in her hand, her mind immediately associated it with the scenes in some romance movies. "What do you need to change?" "It's so cold, just put it on directly." Kinzu answered casually while buttoning his own clothes without even turning his head. "Thanks to riding a pig on the grassland for the 100,000 starting coins reward. The leader that Leon has always dreamed of, actually appeared like this. I'm so excited today. According to the rule that one helmsman will act 2 chapters, and one alliance leader will act 20 chapters, Leon will act 20 chapters. Together with the previous ones, Leon now owes a total of 24 chapters. I will work hard to write and try to make up for it as soon as possible." Chapter 656 Hot Pot. When Zumengyo woke up, it was almost completely dark outside. The moment she opened her eyes, she was a little dazed, because the room in front of her was not a small and warm bedroom. The luxurious decoration, the familiar room layout, and those familiar yet different things all made her head feel unreal for a moment. After leaning against the head of the bed for a long time, Zumengyo came back to her senses. She also realized that this was no longer her own little nest. Lifting the quilt, Zumengyo was about to put on her clothes and get out of bed to wash up, but she unexpectedly found that a set of coral fleece pajamas was neatly folded on the side of the bed. The soft coral fleece gave people a warm feeling at first glance. And looking at the pink color, it was obviously not a man's clothes. Picking up the pajamas, Zumengyo put them on and walked into the bathroom in slippers. Sure enough, on the washstand, a set of brand new toiletries also occupied more than half of the space. After washing up, Zumengyo did not stay upstairs for long, but opened the door and walked downstairs with a happy mood. However, just after opening the door, a little guy next to her raised his head alertly. When their eyes met, Zumengyo was surprised to find that Xiaodadu was actually in the small living room not far from the door, just looking at her quietly. "Xiaodadu, why are you here?" Walking over, Zhu Wenguo picked up Xiaodadu, pinched its little nose, and asked with a smile. Xiaodadu certainly couldn't answer her, but kept complaining in his heart, "I don't want to come either, it's so warm next to the fireplace. If the bad owner hadn't forced me to come here, and didn't give me food when I left, I wouldn't be too lazy to come." Zhu Wenguo certainly didn't know the little guy's complaints in his heart, so she walked up and picked up Dadu. While walking downstairs, Zhu Wenguo stroked the little guy, still curious in her heart, why is the little guy here alone? Before she even went downstairs, Zhu Wenguo's cute little nose wrinkled slightly, and she sniffed the air carefully. "What is this? It smells so good." Zhu Wenguo muttered to herself, and her steps became faster. When she came downstairs, the living room was empty. "Oh, that's not right." Looking at Daha and Xiaohe who raised their heads alertly and looked over here, and the two brothers Daha who did the same, Zhu Wenguo showed a brilliant smile on her face. She also liked these cute little guys very much. However, the little guys were not very close to her. After seeing that they were not strangers, they put their heads down again, curled up their legs, moved closer to the fireplace, and continued to look for Zhaogon. Seeing this, Zhu Wenguo was not disappointed. She knew from a young age that if you want to get something, you must give something first. She and the little guys had only met once, and she had not even met Dao and Xiao yet. Of course, she didn't expect them to be very close to her. However, Zhu Wenguo was also very confident in herself. She believed that after constant contact, she would definitely be able to make those little guys obedient. If she couldn't even take care of a few little guys, how could she handle the others? Thinking thoughtfully, Zhu Wenguo followed the fragrance in the air, passed through the empty living room, and came to the dining room next door. "Wenguo, are you up?" Hearing the voice, Qin Zhu in the kitchen turned around and smiled at her. "Are you hungry? The meal will be ready soon." Zhu Wenguo walked in, leaned against the door of the dining room, and looked at Qin Zhu busy in the kitchen. She felt a warm feeling in her heart. What a familiar scene, it appeared in her dreams countless times, but she didn't expect it to come true. After waiting for a long time, Qin Zhu didn't hear a response from behind him, and couldn't help but turn around in surprise. Looking at the girl in pink pajamas behind him, he asked with some concern, "Wenguo, what's wrong with you?" Zhu Wenguo came back to her senses, smiled and shook her head. "What did you cook today? Why is it so fragrant?" Qin Zhu didn't think much about it, turned around and continued to look at the soup in the pot, and replied with a smile, "Nothing, I just bought some hot pot base last time, and we're having hot pot today." Hot pot? Zhu Wenguo was stunned, and suddenly felt that she seemed to be a little hungry. As an authentic southern girl, Zhu Wenguo not only has no resistance to spicy food, but also likes it very much. Therefore, she has eaten a lot of hot pot, and she never gets tired of it. Of course, looking at Qin Zhu busy in the kitchen, the beautiful Zhu was also a little worried. Hot pot is not so easy to make, and this is not really related to cooking skills. Because whether the hot pot is delicious or not, one is to look at the pot base, that is, the soup base of the hot pot. Another is to look at the combination of sauces. Sometimes a good combination of sauces can also cover up the shortcomings of the pot base. Of course, the most important thing is to look at the ingredients. Because these ingredients are basically eaten after being shuffled, if the ingredients are not good, the feeling will not be very wonderful. The reason why Donleon mutton is so famous is because their soup base is all made from broth. Not only that, their ingredients are all specially supplied, and the taste makes Zhu Wenguo never forget it after eating it once. "Come on, make way, and prepare to eat." With a shout, Qin Zhu came directly to the restaurant with a large copper pot. A small stove had already been placed on the rectangular dining table in the restaurant. When Qin Zhu put the hot pot on it and lit the fire from the side, Eva also brought up some prepared ingredients. Zhu Wenguo smiled kindly at Eva, walked into the kitchen, and helped to carry things out. "Clean, is it too much?" Looking at the ingredients being brought up one by one, Zhu Wenguo couldn't help but stick out her tongue. This is really not an ordinary richness. Qin Zhu prepared several plates of beef and mutton alone, as well as various vegetables and seafood. Especially the 2 large lobsters, which were also peeled and placed aside. The white and tender shrimp meat looked very appetizing. "How can there be so much?" Qin Zhu chuckled evilly, leaned close to Zhu Wenguo's ear and whispered, "You are too thin, you need to eat more." Hearing this, Zhu Wenguo didn't know what she was thinking about, and her originally fair and tender little face instantly flushed with 2 blushes. Giving Qin Zhu a charming little roll of the eyes, Zhu Wenguo ignored him, came to sit down at the dining table, and said, Sister Eva, you sit down too, I'm starving. I got off work at 9 o'clock, and then I saw the heartbreaking news, and I was a little distracted from typing. I didn't dab more today, please forgive me. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descargar y subir en Cinesfoot os invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 657 Chinese Restaurant Plan. Originally, Zhu Wenguo just wanted to fill her stomach, so she picked up a piece of beef, put it in the pot and rinsed it, and put it directly into her mouth without dipping it in the sauce prepared by Qin Zhu. However, as soon as the beef entered her mouth, Zhu Wenguo noticed something was wrong. Although it was not dipped in sauce, the beef had its own fresh fragrance, and it tasted just right after being rinsed in the soup pot. Using a little force with her teeth, Zhu Wenguo slowly chewed it, and her bright eyes narrowed into a small slit. Clean, how did you do this? How come it tastes so good without the sauce? It's good as long as it tastes good. I'm afraid you won't like it. Qin Zhu untied his apron and put it aside. After taking 2 bottles of red wine from the wine cabinet, he also sat down with a smile. You eat this every day in China. When you come here, I'm afraid you will blame me for not changing it up for you. How could that be? Zhu Wenguo's fair and tender face revealed an unconcealed smile. You know I never get tired of this. Qin Zhu certainly knew that, otherwise he wouldn't have prepared hot pot for her on the first day she came. Come on, try the beef here and see how it tastes. As he said that, he handed over a plate of meat rolls made from premium beef. What kind of meat is this? Is there any difference? Zhu Wenguo didn't hesitate. She picked up a piece of meat with some curiosity and put it directly into the hot pot. The hot pot Qin Zhu prepared was the kind of Xuanyang pot with 2 flavors. On one side was clear soup, and on the other side, there were a lot of peppers, which looked very beautiful in red. Zhu Wenguo chose the clear soup base on the side. It's not that she doesn't like spicy food, but the clear soup base makes her appreciate the deliciousness of the soup base and ingredients. Looking at the beautiful woman eating with small bites, Qin Zhu didn't hide it. He pointed to several pots of different beef and said with a smile, the meat is not different, but the ratings are different. This one is the best, that one is the special, and that one is the best. Well, it's really different. Zhu Wenguo nodded. She also knew something about the ratings of American beef. However, looking at Qin Zhu, she smiled and asked, are these all produced in your ranch? Yes, they are all produced in the ranch. How about it? The taste is different from the domestic ones, right? Qin Zhu was talking, but his hands were not idle. He kept putting things into the hot pot and then passed them to Zhu Wenguo on the side. Zhu Wenguo didn't refuse Qin Zhu's thoughtfulness, but smiled sweetly at him. It does feel different, Zhu Wenguo frowned, pondered for a moment, and slowly said, not only compared to domestic beef, but also compared to the top beef I've eaten, it's much better. You have a good eye. Qin Zhu was not polite at all, he gave her a thumbs up and said, my beef is unique in the world. Pucci. Zhu Wenguo, who was very serious at first, laughed out loud after hearing what Qin Zhu said. You're almost going to heaven when I praise you a few words. She rolled her eyes at Qin Zhu, and the smile on her face could not be concealed. She obviously didn't take Qin Zhu's words seriously. How could it be possible that the beef was unique in the world? Qin Zhu didn't argue, and the smile on his face was still bright. Some things just merit yourself. By the way, Zhu Wenguo kept using her chopsticks, but asked, Clean, have you ever thought about opening a Chinese restaurant? Chinese restaurant? Qin Zhu shook his head and sighed deeply. Who eats Chinese food here? You've seen what the Chinese food made in those Chinese restaurants in New York is like. Yes, that's why I let you open one, because I know. Zhu Wenguo put down her chopsticks, picked up the wine glass and took a sip of red wine, and smiled and teased. Didn't you say that your beef is unique? Maybe those foreigners will buy it. Now it was Qin Zhu's turn to roll his eyes. His beef was good, but the wine would not sell well if it was not well known. However, Zhu Wenguo's suggestion also gave Qin Zhu some ideas. Yes, why open a Western restaurant in the United States? If we want to open a restaurant, we should open a Chinese restaurant. Even if foreigners don't eat it, aren't there so many Chinatowns? Seeing that Qin Zhu was still in deep thought, the beautiful Zhu gently touched him with her feet and asked with some concern, Clean, you won't take it seriously, will you? Oh. Kinzu came back to his senses and smiled. I have this idea. Zhu Mengyo got anxious when she heard it, and hurriedly said, didn't you just say that foreigners don't accept our eating habits? Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. Don't worry, I'm just thinking about it. Besides, if it doesn't work, we can start from Chinatown. Zhu Mengyo thought about it and felt that what Kinzu said did make some sense, so she didn't express any opinions. A dinner, from 6 o'clock, lasted until more than 8 o'clock in the evening. The atmosphere at the table was also very good. After finishing the discussion with Kinzu, Zhu Mengyo chatted with Eva and Dale. Although the relationship between the few people was a bit complicated, it was not shown during the chat, so the atmosphere was still quite good. The 2 bottles of red wine that were taken out were also quickly finished by the few people. After 2 bottles of wine, although they didn't get drunk, a blush appeared on the faces of the 2 women. As for Dale, well, this little bit of wine hasn't even warmed up yet. After leaving the endgame to Dale and the slightly drunk Eva, Kinzu supported Zhu Mengyo and walked upstairs in the ambiguous or complicated eyes of the 2. Kinzu was fine. His face was very thick now. Let alone this matter, even if he was shot with a bullet, it might not be penetrated. But Zhu Mengyo was not the same. The little girl's face was still very thin. Everyone knew what would happen after going upstairs. Although she was willing in her heart, she still felt a little uncomfortable all over her body when she was watched by the 2. Because of this, her little hand never left Kinzu's waist along the way, which made our landlord Kin feel both painful and expectant. Only after entering the bedroom did Zhu Mengyo's expression look a little better. She gave him a coquettish look and said, "You bad guy, why are you in such a hurry to go back to the bedroom? You just had dinner, can't you have a good rest?" "Rest? Of course I can have a good rest." Kinzu smiled and continued, "Aren't we back to rest?" "You, Seeing the drunken look of the beauty, Kinzu didn't give her a chance to speak. He picked her up and walked directly to the big bed. Chapter 658. Another step forward in relationship. Okay, it's not a big deal. Zhu Mengyo came over and bravely gave Kinzu a sweet kiss in front of Eva, and then revealed her foxtail. The little guys are a little fat, and it's right for them to exercise. Glancing at the little guys who were eating in a corner, Zhu Mengyo first affirmed Kinzu's strategy, and then changed the subject, looking worried, and said, "Look, their body shapes are so non-standard, if they get fatter, there may really be problems, don't you think?" "Yes, that's true." Kinzu nodded in agreement. He agreed with what Zhu Mengyo said. If a dog is too fat, it is really not conducive to movement. But why do I have a bad feeling in my heart? Hearing what Kinzu said, the beautiful Zhu smiled slyly, blinked her big eyes, and said in a sweet voice, "Since the little girls have gone to play, we can't stop. You can take them running in the future." "What?" Kinzu was a little stunned. "It's so cold, and you want me to take them running?" The beautiful Zhu had an expression on her face that you guessed it right. She picked up a sandwich and ate it while saying, "Dear, you also said that we are doing this for the good of the little ones, right?" What else could Kinzu say? He cast his eyes on Eva on his side, but the big foreign horse not only ignored him, but also gave Zhu Mengyo a thumbs up with a look of admiration on her face. Okay, can't I go?" Under the pressure of the eyes of the combination of Eastern and Western beauties, Kinzu had to raise his hands and surrender obediently. Picking up a piece of fried egg and putting it in his mouth, Kinzu walked out while muttering, "Rebellion, all rebellion." The 2 girls smiled at each other, and no one spoke, but it felt like the relationship between the 2 had taken a step closer. Although Kinzu looked very reluctant on the surface, he was also happy in his heart. He knew that Eva was trying to please Zhu Mengyo in disguise for his own sake. And our beautiful Zhu, with her smart little head, it was impossible for her not to see Eva's purpose. But since she didn't resist, it could only mean one thing, that is, beautiful Zhu tacitly agreed to something. Thinking of this, Kinzu felt that his blood was boiling all over his body. Looking at the little guys who lay down in the nest after eating, he walked over and picked them up one by one. Woo! With a pair of small eyes, Data's handsome dog face was blank. "What are you looking at? It's time for exercise. Go." Holding the little guy's ears, Kinzu laughed and scolded and pushed the guys out. Now, the little guys were not happy, and they kept humming and refused to move. Especially Daha, after turning his head and looking around, he made sure that he didn't see the little girl, so he hummed even harder. "The little devil is not here today, why do you still exercise? Let us sleep for a while." Qin Zhu understood what Daha meant, but since he understood it, there was no room for negotiation. So he patiently communicated with Daha, "Brother, your master doesn't want to exercise either, but now I'm not going to do it obediently. So, you all should be obedient, or I'll have someone deal with you, huh?" Seeing that the master was going to be serious, Daha and Xiaohe became obedient, leaving Dahu and Xiao still humming without knowing why. Qin Zhu was not in a hurry, just watching the little guy humming, with a bigger smile on his face. "Be good, hum for a while, so that I can rest more." However, just as his thoughts arose, he was discovered by the beautiful Zhu behind him. "Qin, don't the little guys want to go?" Qin Zhu nodded hurriedly and said seriously, "It's okay, Mengyo, don't worry, I'll get them out in a while." The beautiful Zhu didn't buy it. She rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Then tell them that if they don't go out in 2 minutes, they won't have lunch. It's pork bone rice." As soon as the voice fell, there were a few washing sounds, and the place in front of Qin Zhu became empty. Looking carefully, including the 4 little guys who were still humming, they ran out of the villa in a flash, which scared Qin Zhu himself. Not to mention him, Zhu Mengyo behind him was also stunned, and the sandwich in her hand fell onto the plate in front of her. "Oh my god, dear, why are all your pets so smart?" The beautiful Zhu opened her mouth in surprise. She knew that Daha and Xiaohe were smart, but why were the 2 little guys so smart? Qin Zhu smiled reservedly. Although he didn't say anything, his face was full of pride. Zhu Mengyo turned around and didn't say anything, but asked, "By the way, I haven't asked you yet, are those 2 little guys the little tigers you mentioned?" "Yes, they are the 2 children of the jaguar and the white tiger." Qin Zhu nodded, and took the 2 who had already eaten to the outside of the villa. So cute, they looked like ocelots. When they came under the porch, the beautiful Zhu forgot Qin Zhu for a while, and began to stare at the 2 little tigers without blinking, showing great interest. "Look, that's the white tiger right over there, the father of the little guys." After a circle, Qin Zhu found the white tiger sunbathing in the open space on the other side. Following the direction of Qin Zhu's finger, the beautiful Zhu also saw the white tiger lying lazily over there, and her beautiful eyes were wide open. It was really the first time for her to watch a big tiger so closely. Following Qin Zhu, Zhu Mengyo also came to the big guy, but found that there was not even a rope on the big tiger, and she couldn't help but worry. "Will it bite people?" Zhu Daimaren's tone was full of worry. "Why don't you have any safety measures? What if it suddenly attacks and hurts people?" Qin Zhu smiled confidently, waved at the white tiger, and explained, "Mengyo, don't worry, this is the animal taming technique taught to me by an old Taoist priest, and it has never been wrong so far." "Old Taoist priest?" Zhu Daimaren looked at her lover with some suspicion. "Isn't he an old Chinese doctor? How did he become an old Taoist priest again?" "Ahem, yes, a wandering Taoist priest." Under Zhu Daimaren's eager gaze, Qin Zhu remained calm, which made Zhu Daimaren uncertain. Could it be that what this guy said was true? Before she could think about it, she felt that there was something in front of her. She looked closely and happened to meet the cold big eyes of the white tiger. In an instant, Zhu Mengyo felt that she saw a clear spring, and in that spring water, there was curiosity and doubt, as well as a deep sense of intimacy. Chapter 659. If it is gold, it will shine wherever it is. After a brief surprise, the beautiful Zhu approached the white tiger tentatively, carefully placed her hand on its furry head and stroked it. The reaction of the white tiger really shocked the beautiful Zhu. In her impression, big tigers are almighty, domineering and ferocious, not like this now. Looking at the well-behaved tiger in front of her, which seemed to be a big cat, the beautiful Zhu squinted at Qin Zhu and asked in disbelief, "Is this a real tiger?" Qin Zhu did not explain, blew a whistle, and waved at the big tiger that raised its head. Hearing the whistle, the beautiful Zhu raised her head and looked around, not knowing what he was calling over. At the moment when the beautiful Zhu was puzzled, the white tiger that was still lying lazily in front of her stood up like lightning, and disappeared in front of several people in a few leaps. This sudden change scared the beautiful Zhu, and she didn't care about looking at the big tiger, and she jumped away with a scream. Don't be afraid, it won't bite." Qin Zhu saw this and quickly stepped forward, hugged the beauty for a long time to comfort her, which made Zhu Mengyo calm down a little. "What's wrong with it? Why did it run away suddenly?" Zhu Mengyo looked at the direction where the white tiger disappeared, and patted her chest in shock. She ignored the wolf-like eyes of someone and kept lingering on a certain part. After waiting for a long time and hearing no one to reply, Zhu Mengyo turned around. Following Qin Zhu's eyes, she also understood what the problem was. Without any hesitation, Zhu Mengyo stepped on someone's foot, and finally Qin Zhu came back to his senses. Ahem, well, Mengyo, what did you say just now? Qin Zhu smiled and rubbed his big feet. He was secretly glad that Mengyo didn't like to wear high heels, otherwise he would have suffered in the future. Zhu Mengyo had no choice but to repeat the question, then looked at the woods over there in surprise and asked, "It won't just go away and never come back, will it?" Qin Zhu heard about this and waved his hand nonchalantly. "Don't worry, Mengyo, it will definitely come back. Didn't you say it's not a real tiger? I'll let her go hunting, and I'll show you the harvest later." Hunting? Zhu Mengyo's mouth twitched. Are you kidding? You'll let a big tiger, a carnivore, go hunting? Do you expect to snatch food from the tiger's mouth? The beautiful Zhu was about to say a few coquettish words to remind her lover, "Look, what a big mistake you made. If a tiger can let go so easily, the fat meat that is already at its mouth, then it is not called a tiger." But before she could say anything, her eyes just glanced unconsciously, and she couldn't move away anymore. This not far from her, a brown voice was jumping towards this side. And in its big mouth, there was a bloody pheasant, wailing weakly. How is this possible? Can a tiger help people hunt? Shaking her head, the beautiful Lady Zhu looked as if she had seen a ghost, which made Qin Zhu laugh. When the white tiger came to him, put down the pheasant in his mouth, and ran to the side to rinse his mouth, Qin Zhu smiled and cast his eyes on Zhu Mengyo. See? This time it's not a fake tiger, right? The beautiful Lady Zhu was a bachelor, and after losing, she nodded decisively, and asked curiously, "It is indeed a real big tiger. I really can't figure out how you are so familiar with it." Qin Zhu smiled and didn't explain, letting the beautiful lady guess. Although such a small talk was quite time-consuming, Qin Zhu's mission was still not gone. But what made him happy was that the beautiful Lady Zhu actually changed her clothes and trotted along. Now, not only Qin Zhu was happy, but also the little guys had a much better attitude towards the beautiful Zhu. How does the saying go? Only when you go through hardships together can you cultivate feelings. Of course, if they knew that it was the beautiful Zhu who insisted on letting them run, they would probably not be so easy to talk to. While jogging around the villa, Qin Zhu did not forget to look back at the little guys behind him. After seeing that the little guys had caught up, he pouted at Zhu Mengyo next to him. "Look, how enthusiastic the little guys are. You should run with them more in the future." The beautiful Zhu glanced at him coquettishly. "Why, it's only the first day, and you want to be lazy? How can that be?" Qin Zhu smiled and teased, "Isn't there a saying? Men and women work together, and work is not tiring." The beautiful Zhu did not respond. Her eyes passed Qin Zhu and fell on the vegetable greenhouses that stood up next to the vegetable field, and the busy workers. "Is that a greenhouse under construction?" Zhu Mengyo asked curiously. Qin Zhu also followed her gaze and smiled when he heard her words. "Yes, the vegetable greenhouse we built is going to be used to grow vegetables." "Is it so urgent? Are you rushing to work in the middle of winter?" The beautiful Lady Zhu was a little curious, especially watching those white people busy building steel frames in the cold winter, which was really a kind of thing that made people feel physically and mentally happy. Shrugging his shoulders, Qin Zhu changed his direction and ran towards the construction site, while explaining, "There is nothing we can do about it. The vegetables in the restaurant are selling very quickly, and I am already in short supply." The beautiful Lady Zhu looked at Qin Zhu running beside her speechlessly, rubbing her head, and asked helplessly, "You even have to use vegetables from the ranch? Can you make back the cost of transporting them back and forth every day?" She suddenly felt that her man didn't seem to be very good at doing business. As if he knew what Zhu Mengyo was thinking, Qin Zhu smiled brightly. Instead of explaining, he asked, "Dear, you have also eaten these vegetables. What do you think of their taste?" Zhu Mengyo nodded decisively. "Of course they are good." Then she reacted and said with sudden realization, "Are you trying to use this as a gimmick? But the cost is too high, isn't it?" "It is a bit high." Qin Zhu nodded, agreeing with Zhu Mengyo's point of view, but he explained, "These are all worth it." Then, Qin Zhu explained the response of the restaurant in detail to Zhu Mengyo. After listening to Qin Zhu's explanation, Zhu Mengyo opened her mouth in surprise. How can it have such a good effect? Even if it is so much more expensive than ordinary vegetables, how can it be sold so much? Of course, it is gold, and it will shine wherever it goes. Qin Zhu said this in a very pretentious way. Chapter 660 How to Make Money Without Getting Into Trouble. Go on, keep making it up. The beautiful lady Zhu curled her lips. For so many years, isn't there enough gold buried? If there is no reason, can some vegetables drive the development of the restaurant? She really doesn't believe it. Not only does she not believe it, Qin Zhu doesn't believe it either. But how do you ask him to explain the spiritual energy? Should I just tell her directly that there is spiritual energy in my vegetables, and eating them is good for the body? As long as you eat them, you will feel the benefits. Seeing Qin Zhu was a little embarrassed, Zhu Wengyu's eyes were a little disappointed, but she still smiled and changed the subject, asking, "You have built so many greenhouses, when are you going to start sowing?" "In 2 days, when all the greenhouses are built, we will sow." Looking at Zhu Wengyu's somewhat disappointed eyes, Qin Zhu hesitated for a while, and still stopped. "What's wrong?" Seeing Qin Zhu stopped, Zhu Wengyu also stopped and looked at him with some confusion. Qin Zhu said nothing, waved his hand, and sent the little guys away, then he took the beautiful Zhu into the grove next to him. Zhu Wengyu didn't think much and followed Qin Zhu in. It was not until she came in that Zhu Wengyu realized something was wrong, because Qin Zhu's big hands had already wrapped around her waist. "You, what are you doing?" Looking at the man who was so close to her nervously, Zhu Wengyu stuttered. Qin Zhu smiled and deliberately frightened her. "There's no one here, and it's so quiet, it's just right to do something you love." Zhu Wengyu opened her eyes wide and looked at Qin Zhu with shame and anger, but then her expression softened again, and she said with a hint of pleading in her voice, "Can we go back to the villa? We really can't be here." Qin Zhu was also afraid that he had teased her too much. If he really teased the little girl, it would be a trouble. So he let go of his hands, from circling to hugging, and said teasingly with a smile, "Wengyu, why are you going back to the villa? Don't you think this is a good place to talk? Talk about things?" Zhu Wengyu was stunned, and looked at Qin Zhu doubtfully. "Yes, I mean to talk about things, ouch." Covering his feet, Qin Zhu looked at the beautiful Zhu with resentment. "Isn't this too harsh? Humph, this is a lesson for you, let's see if you dare to do it again in the future." The beautiful Zhu covered her blushing cheeks, looked arrogant, and turned away to ignore the bad guy. Qin Zhu was secretly happy watching from behind, but the pain from his feet still made him frown when he moved a little. Zhu Wengyu was really merciless this time. With one kick, Qin Zhu felt that if it were in the past, he would definitely have broken his bones. But fortunately, after several strengthening of physical fitness, he only felt a little pain now. "Okay, tell me what you want to say." When the blush on her face faded a little, the beautiful lady Zhu turned around and muttered, "We agreed to take the little ones for a run, don't try to find excuses to delay." "How could it be? Am I the kind of person?" Qin Zhu first cried out for injustice, and then asked mysteriously, "Dear, do you know why I can attract customers with vegetables?" "Why?" Zhu Wengyu really came to life, and her eyes became bright. She was also a person who couldn't hide things, and this question had been tickling his heart. "Because these vegetables were cultivated by me with a nutrient solution." Qin Zhu thought for a long time, and still replaced the spiritual energy with nutrient solution. "Nutrient solution?" Zhu Wengyu blinked her big eyes and repeated it with some doubt. "Yes," Qin Zhu nodded and explained in a serious tone. "Seeds soaked in nutrient solution not only mature quickly, but also have a great promoting effect on the human body. So, those who have tasted the sweetness will flock to it." Zhu Wengyu believed Qin Zhu's statement. Because only in this way can it be explained why he would rather use such a cost-wasting method to use his own vegetables. Yes, anyone who has tasted this kind of vegetable will want to eat more. Qin Zhu smiled like an old fox. But in this way, this situation will sooner or later attract the attention of others. After temporarily believing Qin Zhu, the beautiful lady Zhu also began to consider Qin Zhu, and said with some worry, "After all, your restaurant is a Michelin 3-star restaurant. Whether it is a competitor or someone else, they will pay close attention to it." This. Qin Zhu was a little speechless for a moment. He really hadn't considered this. Come to think of it, after all, everyone knows each other well, so there is no need for special investigation. As long as you pay a little attention, you can find out that something is wrong. Originally, everyone was an athlete on the same level, but one of them was suddenly moved forward more than 10 meters before the start. Now, what do you want the other contestants to do? If they don't get angry, they are considered to be well-mannered. Seeing that Qin Zhu was a little worried, the beautiful lady Zhu who raised the question comforted him. "Qin, don't worry too much, isn't it still okay? At most, you can say that you have developed a new variety of vegetables." Hearing this, Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head, and his hand around the beauty tightened a lot. This is also a way, but how do you explain the beef then? Beef? Zumengyo was stunned again. What does this have to do with beef? Kinzu smiled awkwardly and explained, I have cultivated the grass on the ranch with nutrient solution, so the quality of these Angus cattle that eat the grass should be improved a lot. The beautiful Zhu stuck out her tongue, looked at Kinzu with sudden enlightenment, and said with a teasing face, no wonder you want to run to the United States. Tell me the truth, did you plan your future at the time? No way, Kinzu scratched his head uncomfortably. It felt really good to take credit for other people's achievements. However, facing the staring eyes of the beautiful Zhu, Kinzu had to put away all his thoughts and explained with a smile. You know, I'm a student of biotechnology. I have nothing to do here all day, so I studied these things with a few friends and professors. Zumengyo nodded suddenly, without doubting Kinzu's words, but when she looked at him again, her eyes were full of admiration and expectation. A man who can master a good technology is so charming. Ahem, okay, Landlord Kin is being narcissistic again. Although the reason is now clear, Kinzu is still racking his brains about how to deal with it. How can he run his restaurant without making others jealous? In other words, how can he make money without getting himself into trouble? Thanks to Xiaoyo2 for his support, I will add more chapters for the owner of Jiashua Shapa, 2/4 chapter 661 Soaking Seeds. After thinking it over again and again, Kinzu couldn't think of any good way, or no good excuse, to explain why his vegetables were better than others. Since he couldn't think of it, Kinzu didn't think about it anymore. He called a few little guys over, took Zhu Demaran, and continued to go to the construction site. Zumengyo now regretted it a little. Why was she so curious? If she didn't ask, Kinzu wouldn't think so much. However, it must be said that Kinzu's attitude of not hiding anything also made Zhu Demaran secretly happy in her heart. I really didn't see the wrong person. On the other side, Ernst was holding a hamburger in his hand, eating while directing the workers to work. As a dignified manager, he turned into a contractor as soon as he arrived at the project of Dekin Manor. There was no way, the stern tone of the company's big boss made him unforgettable until now. He was enjoying a simple breakfast, but he accidentally glanced and saw Kinzu running from a distance. Now, he didn't care about eating the hamburger and hurried to meet him. Hi, dear Kin, why are you here so early today? Kinzu glanced at the beautiful lady Zhu who seemed to be smiling beside him, and couldn't help but criticize this big fool in his heart. He said this as if he usually got up very late, and he just didn't come to check. So, when Ernst was at a loss, Kinzu had decided to come and check every day when he was running until the project was completed. How is it? When will the project be completed? Kinzu looked at it and it seemed that the steel frame was almost built. Sure enough, Ernst finished the burger in a few bites, wiped his hands, and introduced with a smile. Clean, the main structure is almost built. It will take no more than 2 days to get everything done for you. So fast? Kinzu smacked his lips with some regret. It's okay. Ernst felt that he was a little confused about Kinzu's routine, so he answered cautiously. It was you who said that the sooner the better, why does it sound like it's too fast now? Poor Ernst, how could he know that Kinzu was just having a bad taste, and it was just a pity that he didn't have a chance to vent his anger. But Zumengyo, who was next to him, agreed at this time. Clean, the construction speed is indeed very fast. If it were in China, it might take longer to achieve the same quality. Kinzu smiled, he knew that Ernst had misunderstood his meaning. But it was good that way, so that he would be nervous, and nothing would go wrong in the remaining 2 days. After saying goodbye to Ernst, who was sweating a little, Kinzu and Zumengyo, with the little guy, continued their journey. However, the destination of this stop became a warehouse. Yes, a warehouse. And it was the initiative of the beautiful Zhu. Of course, nothing expected would happen this time. After all, the beautiful Zhu was too thin-skinned, she would be shy even if she kissed outside, let alone this. Kinzu was sure that if he brought it up, the ashamed and angry beautiful Zhu would probably chase him with a knife. Arriving at the warehouse, the little guys were finally liberated. At Kinzu's command, they ran back happily. Anyway, the villa is not far away. In such a cold day, it is more comfortable to stay in a warm place. Besides, usually after exercise, there are delicious comforts. How can these foodies not hurry up? Clean, are you doing it here? Walking into the warehouse, the beautiful Zhu looked around, with a little doubt in her tone. In her opinion, To cultivate seeds, a high-tech laboratory must be required, right? Why is it in a warehouse? What's here? Yes, it's here. Qin Zhu did not see the puzzled expression on the face of the beautiful Zhu. After he came in, he walked straight to the side. Seeing this, Zhu Wenguo quickly quickened her pace and followed him, asking curiously, "Where is your nutrient solution? It's not here, is it? You are too careless." "Don't worry." Qin Zhu smiled and took out 3 drops of spiritual liquid from his arms. "Yes, I always carry the nutrient solution with me." The beautiful Zhu's mouth could not close immediately, and she reached out to take the green crystal, holding it in her hand and observing it carefully. This diamond-shaped green crystal is only about 2 centimeters high, and the waist diameter is only 1 centimeter at most. It looks small and exquisite. But in Zhu Wenguo's opinion, although this green crystal feels very hard, its surface seems to be like water waves, still rippling. "What a magical thing, Qin, how did you do it?" The beautiful Zhu stared at Qin Zhu with her beautiful eyes, and the brilliance in her eyes almost swallowed people. Qin Zhu just smiled and shook his head when he heard this. He found the vegetable seeds that he had sent over a few days ago and explained, "Wenguo, you won't understand this even if I tell you. Anyway, it's just combining the nutrients of many things together." Zhu Wenguo nodded, not quite understanding. Zhu Wenguo really didn't know much about these things, so she was easily fooled by Qin Zhu. Not only did she not continue to ask, but the beautiful Zhu also helped by watching a crystal being put into the bucket with the seeds. After the bucket was filled with water, she watched the crystal slowly get smaller, and then the bucket of clear water became green and dazzling. "It's amazing, Qin. If you publish these, you'll definitely become a great inventor." The beautiful Zhu looked at Qin Zhu with admiration, and her heart was a little excited that she could hardly control herself. "Why publish this? It's so troublesome, let's make money." Qin Zhu touched his nose and thought that he might not be sure whether he would become a great inventor, but he was the first to be sliced, so it was probably very likely. Only this silly girl believed it. Anyway, he had never seen anyone who could turn water into crystals. After leaving the warehouse, Qin Zhu wrapped the collar of his coat, then looked at the beautiful Zhu, whose face was a little red, and asked with a smile, "What are you going to do today? Do you want me to take you to the town for a walk?" The beautiful Zhu put her hands behind her back and walked leisurely towards the villa. She pouted and said, "What's there to see in the town? I'd better go back and cultivate my relationship with the little guys." "Cultivate relationship?" Qin Zhu heard this and mourned for the little guys for a few seconds. After returning to the villa, before entering, Zhu Wenguo heard something. She stopped in surprise, and in Qin Zhu's surprised eyes, she pricked up her ears to listen. "Wenguo, what are you doing?" Seeing the beautiful Zhu doing such a cute pose, Qin Zhu couldn't help but stop as well. Chapter 662 Big Rooster, Cock-a-doodle-doo. "Oh oh oh." A clear and loud rooster crowing sounded in the ears of the two. "You have a rooster?" The beautiful lady Zhu looked at Qin Zhu in surprise. Listening to the sound, it was obviously a big rooster from China. Don't ask Zhu Wenguo how she knew it was the call of a rooster. She is not the kind of lady who is out of touch with the world. Qin Zhu didn't expect the beautiful lady Zhu to ask this. After a moment of surprise, she raised her eyebrows proudly. "Yes, there are roosters and hens, and they are all domestic chicken breeds." "Where did you get them?" Zhu Wenguo looked at Qin Zhu with some suspicion. "You didn't bring them secretly from China?" "I'm on a plane, where can I bring them here?" Qin Zhu rolled his eyes. This girl is really bold. She brought them secretly. Wouldn't that be smuggling? Besides, even if he really wanted to smuggle, why did he have to go to such lengths to smuggle a few chickens? The beauty Zhu just said it casually, and she reacted without waiting for Qin Zhu to explain. After laughing twice, the beauty Zhu couldn't suppress her curiosity and asked, "Where did you get the chickens? They are not sold here, right?" While walking towards the villa, Qin Zhu explained with a smile, "These chickens are raised by a Chinese living in Revere. Last time I gave them some big carp, and they gave me some chickens." As they were talking, Qin Zhu and the others had already walked into the villa. Under his guidance, they continued to walk towards a corner of the villa. Before they approached the corner, the beauty Zhu pinched her nose involuntarily. It was really the sudden change in the smell here that made her a little uncomfortable. Compared with the light and elegant fragrance when she just entered the door, the smell in the corner can be described as stinking. After turning a corner, in front of the beauty Zhu, an area directly surrounded by a fence appeared. In this area surrounded by the fence, there are several high-spirited native chickens and several silly-looking ducks. You just put them here. Seeing this, the beautiful Zhu covered her cherry mouth with her small hand that was pinching her nose, so that her voice was a little muffled. What's wrong? Qin Zhu was a little stunned by the question of the beautiful Zhu. He thought it was pretty good here, except that the smell was a little bad, there was nothing else. Besides, didn't they raise chickens and ducks like this in their hometown? What's wrong? Don't you think this is a waste of the villa? The beautiful Zhu looked at the smiling Qin Zhu next to her with a look of looking at a country bumpkin. Such a good villa, you put such a simple chicken coop in it, it's too cheap, isn't it? Qin Zhu touched his nose when he heard it. After Zhu Mengyo said this, he also felt that he was a little extravagant. Although there are few people living here now, it's no big deal to mess around, but what if there are more people living here in the future? It would be a bit unreasonable to build such a place. Especially when there are guests visiting, people will laugh at it. However, although Qin Zhu understands this very well, it doesn't mean that Zhu Mengyo can be so arrogant. Therefore, Qin Zhu, who felt a little uncomfortable with the look of the beautiful lady Zhu, reached out and pinched her upturned little nose, pretending to be fierce and said, "If you don't tell me a solution, I will enforce the family law." After being successfully attacked by Qin Zhu, the beautiful lady Zhu opened the bad guy's salty pig hand with a look of disgust, and muttered, "Don't joke, your ranch is so big, are you afraid that you can't put a few chickens and ducks? You mean, free range?" Qin Zhu heard this and shook his head hurriedly, rejecting. "You also said that the ranch is so big, if they get lost, where can I find them?" Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes and said helplessly, "You can't fence off a place and build a chicken coop, no one here will steal your chickens." Qin Zhu touched his chin thoughtfully, and he reacted at this time. All along, his way of thinking about things was based on the domestic way. In rural areas of China, as long as their own houses have yards, no one would be willing to build a chicken coop outside. Because you never know who is raising your chickens and ducks for. Perhaps it is because society is developing too fast, people are a little impetuous, and the petty thieves in the countryside have become more arrogant. I remember when I was young, their family also raised a few chickens, and Qin's mother usually took care of them like a baby. But one time, when I got up in the morning, I found that my chicken coop had been looted. The chicken coop, which was originally good, became messy, with scattered chicken feathers everywhere. And those guys were even more arrogant. Perhaps they were afraid that the chickens would keep calling, so they killed the chickens not far from Qin Zhu's house. When Qin Zhu's family looked at the pool of blood on the ground, they were really trembling with anger. But in their hearts, there was also a trace of fear. Because of such a big noise, their family didn't even hear a sound. "Hey, what are you thinking about?" The beautiful lady Zhu waved her white and tender little hand in front of Qin Zhu's eyes, pulling his thoughts out of his memories, and then said, "You should quickly have someone build the chicken coop. It's so cold, and this corner is not warm enough." Qin Zhu came back to his senses, looked at the chicken coop that was simply built with wooden boards, and nodded in agreement. Even with such a simple arrangement, the heavy snow a few days ago did not freeze these guys to death, which really counts as their good luck. Since the decision has been made, Qin Zhu entered the living room, sat down on the sofa, and called old John over with a phone call. Well, he actually wanted Little John to come, but when he came, old John and Little John were together. "Hi, old John, why are you here too?" Seeing the two people coming in, Qin Zhu motioned for them to sit down on the sofa opposite, then pointed at the beautiful Zhu beside him and said with a smile, "Come, let me introduce you, this is my girlfriend Zhu Mengyo, you met last time." The two nodded quickly. Old John, who had just sat down, stood up again, shook hands with Zhu Mengyo, and said with a smile, "Zhu, hello, we meet again." He knew the etiquette of the Chinese people, so he just shook hands. And he knew in his heart that this person would probably be the future boss lady. If he went up to her and gave her a hug and kiss, he, the boss, would probably kick him out directly. Although he felt a little regretful that Eva finally failed to take down the boss, he did not express anything special and still showed enough enthusiasm to Zhu Mengyo. Thanks to Xiaoyo02 for the reward and support. Chapter 663 Medicinal Diet. Americans are quite realistic. They only care about who pays them, and they don't care much about other things. After old John greeted him, the somewhat dull Little John, under the gaze of his father, stood up and greeted Qin Zhu and the others. After the three of them got to know each other again, Qin Zhu smiled bitterly and said, "Old John, I just asked Little John to come and help me buy some things. Why are you here? Have you finished the ranch affairs?" Hearing this, old John shrugged helplessly and complained slightly, "Boss, I'm almost sick from being idle now. I can't herd and can only stay in the office." After a pause, old John saw that Kinzu didn't look impatient, so he continued, "Boss, you know, the ranch is not yet harvest time, so there is nothing to do on weekdays, and I'm just idle all day." Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head. Good guy, this old John is really dedicated. His meaning was very clear. Considering that he had worked hard for this ranch all his life, he should be allowed to retire with pay now and enjoy life. But this guy kept complaining about being too idle all day and finding things to do everywhere. Although he thought so much, Kinzu's thoughts only flashed through his mind. Seeing that little John was looking at him nervously, Kinzu stopped keeping him in suspense. "Old John, what do you think if I build a chicken coop next to the villa?" "Chicken coop?" Old John thought about it thoughtfully, and then said, "Just those chickens and ducks?" Kinzu nodded to show that he guessed right, and showed an admiring expression on his face, and said with a smile, "For now, just those few, but I mainly want to rely on them to expand." Old John heard this and nodded with a smile, "Boss, these are no problem at all, but I need to go to Revere to purchase some things." "No problem." Kinzu readily agreed, and like a mover rich, he carefully instructed, "Old John, don't think about saving money for me, I want the best." When the two left, Kinzu took advantage of the situation and pulled the beautiful Zhu to lie on her back in Kinzu's arms. "What are you doing? It's broad daylight." Blinking her big eyes, Zhu Mengyo became a little nervous. How embarrassing it would be if she was seen by those two women. But that's how things are. What you think is often what he does. So, before she could break free from Kinzu's clutches, a familiar and melodious voice came from behind. "Boss, what do you want for lunch? Are you cooking for me?" Eva came over with a bright smile on her face. She chose to ignore the beautiful Zhu who was lying on Kinzu's thighs with her clothes a little messy. Of course, the reason why she chose to ignore it was just because she was afraid that the thin-skinned beautiful Zhu would be embarrassed. Just now, the beautiful Zhu was lying on her back, so Eva didn't see it clearly, otherwise she wouldn't have barged in directly. Seeing Eva coming over, the beautiful Zhu quickly broke free from Kinzu's arms and tidied her clothes with a blushing face. Kinzu was much calmer than Eva, and his face was much thicker, so when facing Eva, he could still keep his face unchanged, which made Eva, a big foreign horse, have the urge to bite him twice. "I'll cook at noon, you go prepare the ingredients first." As he said that, Kinzu seemed to remember something, smiled at Eva, and said, "Go wash the pheasant that bear you got, and let's stew a pot of soup to drink, and also nourish our bodies." Eva just nodded gently when she heard it. She didn't understand what Kinzu meant. But the beautiful Zhu next to her couldn't do it. With a pair of slender jade hands, she directly touched someone's waist and hit it hard. "Hiss, you murdered your husband." Kinzu covered his waist with a bitter face, looking at the beautiful Zhu with great resentment. "HMPH, you go to sleep by yourself at night." The beautiful Zhu curled her lips, turned her head away very proudly, and didn't look at Kinzu's expression. Last night, a short separation was better than a new marriage, and this beast almost tossed her apart. Today, I still need to make up for it. Okay, make up for it and go to sleep by yourself at night. Anyway, she is afraid of this guy. Kinzu didn't know what the beautiful lady Zhu was thinking. When he said to replenish, he didn't really mean replenishing that, but really replenishing the body. Moreover, it was to replenish Zhu Mengyo's body. After all, someone also knew that he was too much. Of course, the replenishment he mentioned was not simply relying on the chicken soup itself, but medicinal food. That's right, it is the medicinal food nourishment often mentioned in traditional Chinese medicine. After he learned the medical skills, a lot of theoretical knowledge related to traditional Chinese medicine and a lot of dietary medicinal food appeared in his mind. In traditional Chinese medicine, medicinal food can also be regarded as a very important component. It is a unique clinical practical discipline that has gradually formed after thousands of years of continuous exploration and accumulation by the Chinese nation. It is a precious cultural heritage left by the ancestors of the Chinese nation. Well, to put it bluntly, the food made by matching Chinese medicinal materials and food ingredients is called medicinal food. When Zhu Mengyo heard that Kinzu was going to make medicinal food, she was really surprised. You can also make medicinal food. Can it be eaten? Looking at Kinzu suspiciously, Zhu found that she didn't know this man more and more. Not only can he mix nutrient solution, but now he can even make medicinal food. Of course it can be eaten. Kinzu explained calmly. This was taught to me by a very famous old Chinese doctor next to my house. Zhu rolled her eyes coquettishly. This again? With a turn of her eyes, she thought of a very critical question and asked with a teasing look. Since you are making medicinal food, do you have Chinese medicinal materials here? Of course I do. Qin Zhu's expression was still calm. When I picked you up, I bought it in New York, and I'll wait for you to come and make it for you. This simple sentence was like a heavy hammer, hitting Zhu's heart directly, making her whole body hot. She only felt that even her eyes were wet and hot, and she couldn't help but throw herself into the man's arms. Qin Zhu, you are so good to me. The beautiful lady Zhu whispered in a low voice. Qin Zhu put his arms around the beautiful lady's waist and said gently, you are my wife. If I don't treat you well, who can I treat well? Yeah. The beautiful lady Zhu hummed tenderly, then lay in Qin Zhu's arms and said no more. After a long time, Qin Zhu reluctantly pushed Zhu Mengyu away, lowered his head and pecked her pink lips lightly, and said with a smile, okay, if you don't cook now, there will be no food for lunch. You wait here, it will be ready in a while. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 664. Angelica and Wolfberry Pheasant Soup. The winter afternoon sun radiates a gentle light, shining on Qin Zhu, warm but not too hot. Holding a cup of fragrant tea, sitting in a rocking chair under the porch, Qin Zhu looked at the little guys playing not far away, and felt peaceful. The medicinal food at noon was very successful, a pheasant soup made with Angelica and Wolfberry. Not to mention Zhu Mengyu, even the two big foreign horses who frowned at the beginning drank bowl after bowl in the end. There is no way, foreigners have never been very fond of Chinese medicine. In their view, it is incredible to cure diseases by boiling a few wild grasses. What a joke. In that case, what is the use of Western medicine and Western medicine that people like us have spent so much manpower and material resources to study? Therefore, when they learned that Qin Zhu was going to use Chinese herbal medicine to make lunch, the brows of the two big foreign horses, Eva and Dale, wrinkled into a small ball and never stretched out again. Qin Zhu was secretly amused, pretending not to see it, and still busy with his own things. When Qin Zhu brought a pot of fragrant pheasant soup with Angelica and Wolfberry to the table, the two big horses frowned even more. Because the pheasant soup with Angelica and Wolfberry smelled a little different from ordinary chicken soup. Although it was fragrant, it was not the ordinary kind of fragrance, which was difficult to describe. Especially the water that Qin Zhu used to boil the soup was diluted with spiritual liquid, so the taste was even more special. Looking at the frowning eyebrows of the two girls, Qin Zhu was very happy in his heart. He would let you see what the delicious food of China is. He did it as soon as he thought. After filling a bowl of pheasant soup with rich fragrance for the beautiful lady Zhu, Qin Zhu also filled a bowl for each of the two big horses. Boss, we don't need this, you guys drink it. Noticing Qin Zhu's actions, Eva hurriedly wanted to stop him, but unfortunately her reaction was a little late. When Eva stood up, 2 bowls of chicken soup had already appeared in front of them, and with it came Qin Zhu's voice that exuded infinite temptation. Drink it, you'll know after you try it, this is the crystallization of China's 5,000 years. Although they didn't agree with it in their hearts, the 2 big foreign horses couldn't refute it. They looked at each other, picked up the pheasant soup in front of them with a bitter face, and drank it with an expression of going to the execution ground. The result is imaginable. The pheasant soup, which was originally very delicious, became as if it was not a delicacy that could exist in the world after Qin Zhu shamelessly added spiritual liquid. It can no longer be described as melting in the mouth. A pot of pheasant soup disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye under Qin Zhu's stunned eyes. After a while, except for the residue on the ground, the pot of pheasant soup became empty. Not to mention the soup, even the chicken bones were a little incomplete, which made the 4 little guys who were looking forward to it on the ground extremely disappointed. Whose nose is the most sensitive? Except for these little guys, no one in the villa dared to claim the first place. Well, except for humans, no animal dared to claim the first place. So Qin Zhu just started to stew the soup. Daha and Dao, each with their own little brothers, waited at the kitchen door in expectation. This is also thanks to their lack of jumping ability and inability to climb around like cats, so they did not rush directly to the stove and jump into the fire pit. Thinking of the embarrassment of the little guys when they didn't eat the leftovers on the ground, Kinzu couldn't help laughing, and the fragrant tea in his hand was once again brought to his mouth. Turning his eyes, Kinzu looked at the villa behind him, where Zumengyo and Diva were busy cleaning up the mess. Although Kinzu made lunch, it was not his turn to wash the dishes and wipe the table. Well, even if it was his turn, he would find an excuse to slip away. Not to mention, since coming to the United States, except for the first 2 days when he did some housework, so far, Eva has been taking care of the house. Speaking of Eva, Kinzu really felt that he was lucky to get this hot cowgirl. It was also thanks to his lack of hesitation and helping her family that this big foreign horse with a devilish figure was grateful to him, and even gave him the most precious thing in his eyes. Moreover, when facing Zumengyo, who could be said to be a love rival, Eva's performance was beyond Kinzu's expectations. Perhaps this has something to do with the open atmosphere in the United States. Kinzu, who was really confused, simply stopped thinking about it, leaned back on the recline, and leisurely crossed his legs. Just when Kinzu was dazed and a little drowsy under the sun, the sound of a car engine suddenly woke him up. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the familiar pickup truck, which slowly stopped in front of him. The door opened, and Little John jumped out of the driver's seat, and then hurriedly tried to help his father get out of the car. But Old John didn't give him this opportunity. Just when Little John got out of the car, Old John opened the door and got out. Seeing his father trying to climb onto the trunk, Little John felt a headache and hurried over to hold the old man back. Kinzu was stunned watching from the side. He was convinced by this vigorous old cowboy. Without looking, Kinzu knew that the materials in the back of the pickup truck must be used to build a chicken coop, so he put down the teacup and hurriedly got up and ran over. "Hey, Old John, just take a break. I'll find someone to move it." "Well, boss, they are all busy. There is not much." Although he was stopped by Kinzu, he still didn't leave the back of the pickup truck. Obviously, he was still a little unconvinced. Okay. Kinzu waved his hand to interrupt the old man's chatter, and said with a smile, "Old John, what you have to do now is to help me manage this ranch. As for these physical labors, there'll naturally be others to do them." "Well, okay." Seeing that his boss also said so, Old John, who wanted to go up to help, had to retreat to the side in dismay. Gratefully smiling at Kinzu, Little John turned over and climbed onto the back of the pickup truck, and began to hand things down one by one. When Kinzu was about to reach out to take them, 2 pairs of jade hands reached out together. Looking closely, Dale and Erica passed Kinzu and just took the materials handed over by Little John with both hands and put them on the ground to one side. "Boss, let us do these physical work." Erica saw Kinzu in a daze and couldn't help but tease with a smile. Kinzu heard this, smiled embarrassedly, and said hurriedly, "No, you should go and help Eva clean up the house first." Chapter 665 Chicken Coop. Under the insistence of the 2 female bodyguards, Kinzu finally gave in and could only let them work. However, after all the materials were taken down, Kinzu looked at the pair of things that looked like car wheels and scratched his head in confusion. "Hey, Old John, why did you buy these things?" Hearing this, Old John walked over and looked at the direction of Kinzu's finger, and explained with a smile, "Boss, these are of course for easy movement." "Easy to move?" Kinzu blinked. "Does the chicken coop need to be moved?" "Of course." Old John looked as if it was a matter of course. "The ranch is so big, when the food here is gone, we can drag the chicken coop to the other side." Looking at the curious eyes cast by Old John, Kinzu couldn't help but touch his nose. "What's going on? The chicken coop has to move? Is he out of date?" However, since Old John said that the chicken coop can move, it can move. Kinzu simply stopped talking, hugged his hands, leaned on the maple tree beside him, and watched them boss. Under the command of Old John, Little John started to work, while Dale and Erica helped pass things around. "Clean, they're back so soon." Zumengyo, wearing a pink coat and a snow-white scarf, walked out of the villa slowly, accompanied by Eva. Well, of course, Eva was not much better, and she walked very carefully. It was not for anything else, but because they had no self-control, so they ate too much at noon. Only Dale was better, and she could still help with the work. After all, she was a Special Forces soldier, so she had good self-control. Kinzu looked back at the 2 greedy girls and said with a smile, "How are you? Are you feeling better?" The beautiful Zhu curled her lips and looked at Kinzu with resentment. "I haven't asked you yet, what did you put in the soup? Why is it so delicious?" Kinzu shrugged and stretched out his hand to pinch the beauty's smooth little face. "Didn't you see it all? It's just those things." The beautiful Zhu slapped someone's dirty hand away, pouted her lips, and looked at Qin Zhu with suspicion. This is not scientific. I have eaten medicinal food before, and it was made by a famous master in the field of traditional Chinese medicine, but it was not as delicious as yours. Qin Zhu's heart skipped a beat, but his face remained calm. Do I need to ask this? Of course it's because your husband is a good cook. Bah, shameless, whose husband are you? The beautiful Zhu's pretty face suddenly became hot. She secretly glanced at Eva beside her, but happened to meet her half-smiley eyes, and the beauty felt even more embarrassed. Qin Zhu breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. If this girl continued to ask, she would definitely be exposed. After all, the pheasant used in today's cooking was just caught by Bear in the woods. And the few Chinese medicinal materials used were also picked randomly in New York. So there is no way there will be any bonus in the door of the food room. As for craftsmanship, no matter how confident Qin Zhu is, he can't compare with a famous master in the field of traditional Chinese medicine. No, even if Qin Zhu pats his chest and guarantees that his craftsmanship is better than those masters, someone has to believe it. Hey, are you listening to me? Waving her hand, the beautiful Zhu interrupted Qin Zhu's thinking with a clear and pleasant voice. Qin Zhu raised his head with some doubts. Before he could figure out what was going on, he saw the beautiful Zhu's dreamy face looking at him with a trace of grievance and dissatisfaction. What's wrong? What did you say? I ask you, are they making a chicken coop? The beautiful Zhu pouted and looked at Qin Zhu, and asked word by word. Oh, this? Qin Zhu heard the words, just chuckled twice, and said, of course this is a chicken coop, what else can I repair? Is it really a chicken coop? Zhu Mengyo raised her head in surprise. After carefully looking at the busy people, Zhu Mengyo asked with some doubts, but isn't the chicken coop fixed on the ground? Qin Zhu heard the words, so he told the beautiful Zhu the truth he had just heard from old John. Is the chicken coop built like this? After listening to Qin Zhu's story, Zhu Mengyo's cherry mouth was also opened wide in shock, as if she had suddenly realized something. However, the beautiful Zhu underestimated someone's bad intentions. Looking at her big cherry mouth, Qin Zhu couldn't help but have a bit of evil thoughts in his heart. Ahem, well, it's broad daylight, let's think about something serious. After putting aside the distracting thoughts in his mind, Qin Zhu's expression returned to calm, no longer as changeable as before. After watching for a while, the beautiful Zhu, who was a little restless, also came forward to help under the encouragement of Eva. Originally, little John was a big doll, and now under the siege of several women, he had already turned red in the face. In the end, Qin Zhu couldn't stand it anymore, so he went up and pulled the enthusiastic Zhu Daimler away. What's wrong? Clean, are you going out? Being pulled back by Qin Zhu, Zhu Daimler was still a little unhappy, she was just at a critical moment. Qin Zhu smiled and shook his head, nothing, just don't bother others, otherwise, I don't know when a chicken coop will be built. Hearing this, Zhu Mengyo looked at the red-eared little John below and couldn't help laughing secretly. After leaving Zhu Mengyo, the naughty and troublesome guy, little John's spirits were immediately lifted, and the progress of the chicken coop was also growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. As the sun set, the gentle north wind only blew gently, but it also brought a hint of coolness. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a chicken coop that looked a bit like the medieval style appeared in front of several people. Well done, little John, your craftsmanship is simply amazing. Qin Zhu looked at the young man opposite with great approval. Although the chicken coop has not been painted yet, just looking at the shape and material, Qin Zhu felt that if this chicken coop was sold, it would definitely not be cheap. Boss, it's nothing, I just followed the drawings. Little John blushed a little when he was praised by Qin Zhu, and explained honestly. Any guy who knows a little about carpentry can put them together very well. Qin Zhu nodded, without saying much, but asked, Little John, is this chicken coop ready now? Does it need to be painted? Of course. Little John nodded, otherwise it will be so ugly if it's bare like this. I have already bought environmentally friendly paint and will start painting it soon. More chapters for the owner of the Jiaoshu Shu Bar, 3/4 chapter 666. The guy who spares people's dreams. Cock-a-doodle-doo. In the early morning, a loud and somewhat hoarse crowing of a rooster woke Qin Zhu up from his sweet dream. Damn it, who put the chicken coop here? Qin Zhu opened his eyes in a daze. It's just past 5 o'clock, damn it, can't these guys be more quiet? Qin Zhu picked up the alarm clock next to him and looked at it, and grumbled a little dissatisfied. I don't know whose idea it was that day to put the chicken coop under the window at Qin Zhu's bedroom. Now, the crowing of the rooster, which was originally heard after getting up, can be heard early in the morning, and it is still so clear. Pulling up that quilt to cover his head, Kinzu hugged the beautiful Zhu beside him tightly, wanting to sleep comfortably for another nap. Okay, it's time to get up, dear, don't forget your task. Zhu Mengyo, who was also woken up, did not complain like Kinzu, but gently pinched Kinzu's old face with her little hands to remind him that it was time to get up. Okay, Kinzu lowered his head and rubbed the smooth little face of the beautiful Zhu, and said helplessly, you sleep a little longer, I'll get up. Zhu Mengyo shook her little head, yawned cutely, and sat up. It's okay, let's go together, we can't sleep all the time, it will make people stupid. Seeing this, Kinzu had to follow her. Anyway, he went to bed early yesterday. Why did he go to bed early? Ahem, it's because there are no entertainment activities. So, in recent days, as soon as the landlord Qin finished dinner, he couldn't wait to pull his beautiful wife upstairs. At first, the beautiful Zhu was a little resistant, feeling that it was a little too early. But this little resistance couldn't stand the landlord Qin's soft and hard nagging. Sitting on the head of the bed, thinking back to the happy life of the past few days, Kinzu couldn't help but laugh out loud. The beautiful lady Zhu next to him seemed to know what he was laughing at. She stretched out her hand and after a 360-degree rotation, she finally woke Kinzu up from his aftertaste. Ah. It hurts, wife, I was wrong, can you be gentle? Kinzu, with his teeth bared, raised his hands and surrendered very swiftly. Seeing this, Zhu Mengyo couldn't help but burst out laughing and gave this guy a coquettish look. I didn't use any strength, okay? Stop it and get up quickly. Kinzu yawned and got up from the bed, opened the curtains, and looked outside through the extremely smooth floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Under several maple and pine trees, there was a blue-gray castle-like building. In front of this luxurious building, two majestic fiery red roosters were patrolling their respective territories. In a corner on one side, several short and fat ducks gathered together to eat something. Well, looking at the castle-like building, Kinzu admired Little John's vision. As expected of a sultry otaku, he used the castle as a chicken coop. Shaking his head, Kinzu looked outside the chicken coop. There, Kinzu asked Little John to build a fence to limit the range of activities of these guys. Originally, according to Old John's suggestion, they were to be raised directly in the open. In this way, there would be no need to worry about the food of the chickens and ducks, and the meat quality of the chickens and ducks out of the cage would be better in the future. But Kinzu immediately rejected this proposal. Why? Doesn't he know that free range is the best? He knows. But there is no way. There are only a few guys for breeding. If they are released and can't come back, it will be no fun. So to be on the safe side, Kinzu decided to keep them in a cage for a while, and it would not be too late to release them in the open when there are little chicks. Well, wife, Kinzu smiled awkwardly and turned around, looking at Zhu Mengyo who was changing clothes, and suggested sincerely, let's move this chicken coop to another place. Why? Isn't it good like this? The beautiful Zhu combed her smooth hair and looked at him with a puzzled look. Hehe, don't you think they disturb your sleep too much? I don't think so, it's just right, it can make a lazy guy get up on time. Well, Kinzu was defeated again and walked towards the bathroom depressed. They have discussed this issue many times, but each time it ended with Kinzu's failure. Of course, the consequences of this are very serious. The beautiful Zhu didn't let this guy go to bed for 2 days. After washing and changing clothes, the two walked downstairs together. Hey, boss, it's getting earlier and earlier now. As soon as they arrived in the living room, Eva's slightly surprised voice came over. Ahem, early to bed and early to rise, okay? Kinzu touched his nose, said something against his will, and quickly changed the subject. Is breakfast ready? I'm hungry. Hearing this, Eva blinked her big eyes, showed an ambiguous smile and said, well, breakfast is ready, boss, go and replenish your energy. Originally, this was nothing, but with Eva's ambiguous eyes, the taste was immediately a little wrong. Zhu Mengyo, who was originally smiling and watching on the side, immediately had 2 blushes on her face, glared at Kinzu, and then rushed over to find trouble with Eva. Looking at the 2 girls laughing and making a mess, Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head, ignored them, and walked straight to the restaurant. Under Eva's deliberate management, the relationship between the 2 girls became more and more harmonious, and Kinzu often saw them together, whispering something. Kinzu felt both satisfied and a little distressed about what Eva did. However, he couldn't say anything. Say no. That's just hypocrisy. Who doesn't want a harmonious family relationship? Say she did the right thing. Keep working hard. Kinzu couldn't say it himself, not to mention others, it was really too beastly. So, he could only pretend he didn't see it, but whenever he had a chance, he would hug the big mare to comfort her. While thinking about it, Kinzu came to the restaurant. Boss, good morning. Dale and Erica, who were sitting next to him and eating breakfast, nodded slightly at Kinzu. Kinzu came back to his senses, responded with a smile, and picked up a piece of buttered toast and started eating. Erica, who was drinking milk, saw this and nodded at Dale beside her, indicating that it was her turn to take action. Dale hesitated for a moment, but didn't know how to start, and was silent for a while. Kinzu, who had finished a piece of bread, found that the atmosphere was a little wrong. He looked up at the two girls' expressions of wanting to say something but stopped what he was doing, and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Just say it if you have anything to say." Chapter 667 Christmas Vacation. Boss, it's like this. Seeing that she couldn't refuse, Dale had to bite the bullet and said, "Christmas Eve is in 2 days. Erica and a few bodyguards want to go home and ask you for leave." Christmas Eve. Kinzu's thoughts were in a trance, and he didn't hear clearly what she said next. A year has passed so quickly. After Christmas Eve, the Chinese New Year will soon be here, right? After a moment, Kinzu came back to his senses, looked at Erica with a nervous look on her face, smiled and waved his hands. "It's nothing, it's the holiday, it's only right to go back and have a look." After thinking about it for a while, Kinzu said, "How about this? I'll give you half a month off, you go back and spend some time with your family." Ah, Erica heard this and waved her hands repeatedly. "Boss, there's no need for so much, it's enough for us to go back and stay for 2 days." Kinzu picked up the milk and took a sip. After putting down the cup, he said in an unquestionable tone, "It's decided, you go and notify others and go back and spend some time with your family. But if everyone leaves, what about your safety?" Erica pondered for a while and suggested, "How about this, the 12 of us will go back in 2 groups." "No, I'm on the ranch, how can there be any danger?" Kinzu smiled disapprovingly. Now that the white tiger and Cheese are entrenched in the ranch, as long as he pays attention, ordinary people really can't hurt him. "Boss, I think we should divide them into 2 groups." Dale couldn't help but speak up. "Some of their families are gone. If you give them a holiday, they have nowhere to go." Kinzu thought so too, so he nodded. "Okay, then let's give them a holiday in batches. You can arrange the specific adjustment plan yourself." Dale and Erica looked at each other and nodded happily. After breakfast, Kinzu talked to Zumengyo about Christmas Eve while running with the little ones. "Clean, the bodyguards are on holiday, but what about the cowboys? How do you arrange their holidays?" The beautiful Zhu reminded her, gathering her hair. Kinzu heard the words and kept walking, exhaling a breath of hot air. "As for them, I'll go and discuss it with old John. The cattle on the ranch can't be left unattended." Zumengyo nodded. "Yes, this Christmas is just like the spring festival in our country. The holiday is very long, and there can't be any trouble." After a pause, the beautiful Zhu asked again, "Are you going to give out year-end bonuses?" "Yes," Kinzu said without hesitation. "This must be given. Although we have taken over the ranch for less than a year, this year-end bonus still needs to be given. Otherwise, the cowboys will all run away, and what will I do with my cattle?" The beautiful Zhu smiled lightly and didn't say anything else. She was just fulfilling her duty of reminding. Kinzu, on the other hand, thought for a moment and then laughed evilly. "What's wrong? You're laughing so scary." The beautiful Zhu glanced at Kinzu and secretly became alert in her heart. What is this bad guy going to do? Kinzu did not hide it, and with a smile on his face, he asked, "Mengyo, what do you think if I hold back the year-end bonus until the spring festival?" "Why?" Zumengyo was a little stunned when she heard it. "I just feel unhappy." Kinzu curled his lips. "My ranch must follow my rules. If I hadn't just arrived, I would have wanted these guys to celebrate the spring festival with me, not Christmas." "Poochie," Zumengyo couldn't help but laughed at Kinzu again. "What are you laughing at?" Kinzu was a little unhappy. "Look at the companies opened by foreigners in our country, don't they celebrate their own holidays? Christmas is a long day, but the spring festival is only a few days." Speaking of this, the beautiful Zhu stopped laughing and nodded seriously. "I support you, do whatever you say." Kinzu smiled with satisfaction, and moved his big head over, and took advantage of the beauty not noticing, and smacked her. Woof woof woof. Before the beautiful Zhu came to her senses, Daha and Xiaohe couldn't stand it anymore and started to bark in protest. Can you guys pay more attention? Don't you see there are two single dogs behind? After running, Qin Zhu sent away the little guys who were beaten up and drove to the living area. As for Xiao Bai, since the weather turned cold, Qin Zhu had selectively forgotten about it, and it could only stay in the stable and eat hay pitifully. Eva, on the other hand, would go to clean it on time every day. If it weren't for the pet contract, this guy would have rebelled long ago. When he arrived at the living area, Qin Zhu found old John, who was in a daze in the office. Hi, good morning. Pushing the door open, Qin Zhu entered in without any courtesy and sat down on the sofa. Oh, boss, good morning. Old John came to his senses, put down the things in his hands, poured a glass of water, and sat down. Why are you here so early today? Is the chicken coop okay? It would have been fine if he hadn't mentioned this. As soon as he mentioned the chicken coop, Qin Zhu's good mood disappeared and he rolled his eyes helplessly. The chicken coop is good, but the location is a bit bad. Huh. Why? Old John was a little curious. He had also seen the location and it was very suitable for placing the chicken coop. Qin Zhu opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he didn't know where to start. Should he tell him that he couldn't resist the temptation of the beautiful Zhu and tried to move the chicken coop several times but failed? This won't work. He is the big boss, how can he say this? So he coughed twice and quickly changed the subject. Let's not talk about this, old John. Christmas is coming soon, do you have any plans? Sure enough, when Christmas was mentioned, old John immediately forgot what he was going to say just now, and said seriously, Boss, how many days off are you going to give the cowboys? According to the regulations, how many days should they take off? Qin Zhu didn't rush to answer, but asked back. Well, old John shrugged. According to federal regulations, there is only 1 day off on Christmas Day. Well, Qin Zhu was a little embarrassed. These foreigners really have fewer legal holidays than those in China. How many days off do ordinary business owners take? Speaking of this, old John's face was more smiling, and he said excitedly, Boss, ordinary companies usually take holidays for 1 to 2 weeks. Qin Zhu nodded. He understood that it all depends on the boss's mood and financial situation. If conditions permit, it is no problem to take a month off. If conditions do not permit, it is not illegal to take a day off. Of course, if you really take 1 day off, the workers will probably run away. Chapter 668. Busy morning on the ranch. Clean, get up quickly. Didn't you say you were going to help out in the cowshed today? In the early morning, when it was still light outside, Zhu Mengyo pushed Qin Zhu, who was sleeping, awake. Well, what time is it? Rubbing his eyes, Qin Zhu sat up, and subconsciously pinched one hand. Ah, you bastard, be gentle. The beautiful Zhu cried out, her face flushed with shame, and slapped the dishonest hand hard. Although he was hit, Qin Zhu didn't care. He lowered his head and rubbed his face against the beauty's body for a while, and then got up from the bed under her weak resistance. After being pushed like this, the beautiful Zhu suddenly became limp all over. She looked at Qin Zhu, who got up and dressed with some shame and anger, and muttered, You guy, are you born in the year of the pig? Qin Zhu smiled, didn't answer, ran into the bathroom quickly, and started to wash up. He didn't want to stay in bed today. The cowboys had packed up and went home yesterday. Only old John's family was left in the ranch. If he didn't go to help, he probably wouldn't be able to clean the cattle pen today. After washing up, Qin Zhu went outside and was about to change clothes when he saw that the beautiful Zhu was already dressed. Mengyo, why are you up? Although Zhu Mengyo was still yawning, she seemed to be in good spirits. As she walked to the bathroom, she said, I'm going to help too. Eva and the others have gone. I can't sleep at home, can I? Qin Zhu opened his mouth, but the words of persuasion were suddenly speechless. Well, this girl has learned to be smart now. She will carry Eva out whenever something happens. After changing into a set of stain-resistant work clothes, Qin Zhu took Zhu Mengyo downstairs after washing up. Eva and Dale were already waiting downstairs. As for Erica, she and several female bodyguards went back to reunite with their families last night. Although Erica was not there, the sisters Yuan and Aya stayed. According to Dale, they were orphans taken in by the army, and their families had long since passed away. Qin Zhu was sympathetic, and his attitude towards the two slender big horses was even more amiable. Well, what Kinzu didn't know was that it was because of his change in attitude that the two sisters once misunderstood that the boss had some ideas about them, and they were entangled for several days. After a simple meal, a group of 7 or 8 people came to the stable in the dim sky. After each of them chose a horse, they rode to the depths of the ranch. Not to mention, among so many people, there was no one who couldn't ride a horse. Even Zumengyo, after training here for a few days last time, her horsemanship has improved a lot. Of course, she has no chance to show off now. She was held in Kinzu's arms and rode on Xiaobai, who hadn't been out for a long time, and galloped all the way. Perhaps because he had been suppressed for a long time, Xiaobai has been very active since leaving the stable. Especially after setting off, the 4 hooves danced wildly, and in a short while, they left the rest of the people behind, leading all the way to the cattle pen. The remaining horses were not slow, and they caught up soon after Kinzu arrived. Ahem, if the white tiger behind the horses was brought out, perhaps we would know why they were working so hard. Yes, Kinzu brought the white tiger with him before setting off. If the little guys were not too young, Kinzu would have wanted to bring them with him if he was afraid that they would be accidentally trampled to death by the cattle. However, now that the white tiger has been brought, the scene seems a bit awkward. Because more than a dozen Australian herders have given up their positions and ran over to surround the white tiger. Okay, you guys, don't you recognize your own people? Kinzu hurried over and stopped the bloody fight between the two groups. Well, the white tiger didn't take them seriously at all, and still strolled leisurely. However, under Kinzu's persuasion, the two sides finally came into contact with each other in a state of alert. Under Kinzu's terrified gaze, the white tiger came forward and sniffed the Australian cattle one by one. After the white tiger turned around, the Australian cattle also returned the salute. Now it was considered a non-aggression treaty. Hey, boss, you were making a big fuss. Old John rode his chestnut quarter and trotted over with a wry smile on his face. Kinzu shrugged. Sorry, it's my fault for not thinking it through this time. After a few pleasantries, Old John didn't say anything more. He scolded the Australian cattle a few times, and they ran back to where they were. When the cattle pen was opened, thousands of Angus cattle, led by the head cow, walked out in an orderly manner. After so long of adaptation, they have become accustomed to this kind of life. Moreover, with the head cow leading them and the cowboys watching them, they will generally go out to find food honestly. However, there are always some dishonest guys in the herd. For example, those calves that move around in the herd but never get hurt. For them, the daily grazing time is their time to play. And without the oppression and tossing at the big devil, they now dare to leave the herd and stroll around. But today, they obviously chose the wrong target. The female bodyguards may not have as much experience in grazing as the cowboys, but their skills in throwing lassos are not bad at all. Moreover, the game that the cowboys are tired of playing is still very novel to the female bodyguards. So when a cart wanted to go out and run wild, it was tragically discovered that more than one lasso pounced on it. In the blink of an eye, 2 lassos hit the target. If the female bodyguards had not shown mercy and did not use much force, the little guy's head would have been gone with just 1 or 2 directions pulling at the same time. Elsa and Ween, along with a few female bodyguards who were on duty, rode their horses excitedly, replacing the cowboys' work. From time to time, they would throw out the lasso in their hands, and then put a calf back after scaring it half to death. With the rotation, the order of the cattle was not disordered at all, and they began a new day of foraging according to the usual route. Seeing this, Old John couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. What he was most afraid of was that something would go wrong at this time. As long as the cattle reached the pasture, there would be nothing to worry about. Turning his head to look at Kinzu, Old John smiled and said, "Boss, are you going to herd the cattle, or stay and help me clean the cattle pen?" Thinking of cleaning the cattle pen, Kinzu felt a headache and hurriedly said, "Well, Old John, I'd better go herd the cattle. Let others clean the cattle pen." Thanks to Konksai Bang for the 500 starting coins reward. Today is the 3rd update, and I will add more for the owner of Joshua Shapa. 4/4 Chapter 669 Cattle Riot. In the early morning, the vast Tycoon ranch, with fresh grass, was covered with layers of snow. When looking from a distance, one could only see a piece of snow-white crystal. But now, above the endless crystal, there were scattered pieces of black clouds. The youngest cattle that were driven out of the cattle pen, led by the head cow, scattered in all directions, looking for food to sustain their survival today. They are lucky. As long as they are full every day, they will not worry about trivial matters, do not have to worry about how much a square meter of house costs, and do not have to be suffocated by mortgages and car loans. Even, they do not have to worry about finding a wife. They can just go with whoever they like. But at the same time, they are also sad. They keep looking for food every day to survive. When they finally grow up and become strong, they will be excitedly carried into the slaughterhouse by people and end their short lives. The landlord Keen, who was full of thoughts, rode on Shearbar and strolled beside the youngest cattle, just watching them quietly. The one in his arms was the beautiful Zhu, whose face was slightly red. "You are so bad, leaving such a dirty job for them." Nestled in Keen Zhu's arms, Zhu Mengyo recalled what happened just now and laughed. Keen Zhu did turn down the job of cleaning the cattle pen, but it still had to be cleaned in the end. So one to the lead of Dale, several female bodyguards played rock paper scissors, and whoever lost would go. Anyway, Keen Zhu didn't care who went in the end, as long as it wasn't him. Hearing Zhu Mengyo's coquettish words at this moment, he smiled and pressed his head on the beautiful woman's shoulder, taking a deep breath of fresh air mixed with a hint of body fragrance. "You can't blame me for this. I paid them to come here to do things." After a pause, Keen Zhu leaned his face down again and lipped it with a sly smile. When Zhu Mengyo trembled all over, he said seriously, "Besides, don't underestimate them. They are all from the battlefield. Can such a small thing stump them?" Being made weak by Keen Zhu, Zhu Mengyo panted and fell soft in his arms. Hearing this, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at this guy. Of course, she knew that these were nothing. However, after getting up so early and not being able to help, the beautiful Zhu felt that her presence was a little low. Just when Keen Zhu felt that the time was ripe and was ready to further tease the beautiful Zhu, he heard a whole herd of cattle mooing. Moreover, the whole herd of cattle became a little agitated after these cow calls. Woof woof woof. More than a dozen Australian cattle rushed up like arrows from a bow, and began to roar fiercely around the herd of cattle. But how could the frightened cattle be controlled so easily? Although the Australian cattlemen were still roaring at the top of their lungs, the cattle gradually became scattered. Keen Zhu's heart skipped a beat. If the cattle were scattered, it would not be so easy to gather them together again. Gee, without thinking too much, Keen Zhu squeezed his legs on the horse's belly, and Xiaobai suddenly jumped out and ran towards the direction of the commotion. The commotion of the cattle naturally attracted the attention of others. The two sisters Ai and Ween, who won the game of rock paper scissors, and two other female bodyguards were watching over the cattle with Keen Zhu. However, they were not professional cowboys after all. It was okay to watch over the honest cattle, but it was unrealistic for them to control the commotion of the cattle. So at the moment when the cattle began to riot, all they could do was to head towards the source, just like Keen Zhu. "Boss, what's going on?" The moment she saw Keen Zhu, Ai asked with a hint of panic in her tone. "I don't know yet, let's go and take a look first." Keen Zhu was calmer than the female bodyguards at the moment, but his face was a little serious. However, when he was about to get close to the scene, his face changed from serious to gloomy. The smell of blood. Before they got close, Keen Zhu and his men smelled a strong smell of blood. Ai and Ween's faces changed drastically. Because they were grazing today, they didn't bring guns with them at all. "Boss, wait a minute, let's go and take a look." Ween stopped Keen Zhu with a firm face. Keen Zhu nodded slightly, said nothing, and motioned them to go first. When Ween breathed a sigh of relief and rode forward with a few bodyguards, he also followed decisively. "Boss, you, Ai, who was responsible for staying behind to protect Keen Zhu, was a little dumbfounded and was actually a little at a loss for a moment. Didn't we agree to let them go first?" Keen Zhu didn't care about that. He rode his horse to catch up with the others, bypassing several panicked cattle groups, and a bloody scene appeared in front of him. Wolves. There were actually 6 or 7 wild wolves, surrounding a calf and feasting on it. When Keen Zhu and his friends saw the wild wolves also saw them, and immediately stopped eating, staring at Keen Zhu and his friends with a vigilant look. "Boss, you go back first, we don't have guns." After seeing that it was wild wolves, Ween's face was a little solemn, but she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although they didn't have guns, it was no problem for them to deal with a few wild wolves. After hearing Ween's arrangement, Keen Zhu did not move, but took his hand away from the waist of the somewhat nervous Zhu Demaran, put it in his mouth, and blew a loud whistle. Unprepared, Zhu Mengyo was startled by the sudden noise. She turned around and looked at the instigator. Just as she was about to say something, she was shocked by an even louder tiger roar. Roar, roar, roar. With the roar of the tiger, the white tiger walked out leisurely from the trembling cattle. Not to mention the wolves on the opposite side, even the somewhat agitated cattle stopped at this moment, trembling all over. I was scared to death. You two guys didn't even say hello first." In the silence, Zumengyo's coquettish voice made Kinzu a little bit amused. Pinching Zumengyo's little face, Kinzu said helplessly, "This happened suddenly. If I hadn't called the white tiger over, those guys would have pounced on us." Speaking of this, Zumengyo came back to her senses, turned around and looked at the blue-gray wild wolves a few dozen meters away, patted her chest with some fear and said, "It's scary. There are wolves. Aren't you afraid of living here?" "What are you afraid of?" Kinzu was very calm, staring at the place where the beautiful Zhu patted her hands, and said with a smile, "What's wrong with wolves? Aren't there tigers over there?" Zumengyo looked at the white tiger with a strong aura, and was speechless for a moment. Today is the 4th update, extra update for the leader who rides a pig to the grassland, 1/20th chapter 670. White tiger shows its might. At the moment the white tiger appeared, the wandering wolves tensed up and looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Even so, these guys didn't turn around and run away, which made Kinzu feel a little strange. He thought that as soon as the white tiger came out, these guys would run away with their tails between their legs, but they didn't expect them to be so quiet. "Isn't this too disrespectful to me?" He waved at the white tiger and said, "Since you don't want to leave, then stay here." After receiving Kinzu's order, the white tiger shook its big head, kicked its hind legs hard, and rushed up at a speed of 100 kilometers per second. Well, it's just an illusion. Although the speed of the white tiger is fast, it is not to the extent of defying the sky. But even so, the speed of the white tiger surprised the wolves. Before they could react, the bloody mouth of the white tiger had already bitten the neck of a wolf. Pull and throw. A great brown wolf threw a perfect arc in the air and fell on the grass beside it. It twitched twice and then stopped moving. Hiss, so powerful. Seeing this, Ween and several female bodyguards couldn't help shrinking their pupils. It was not that the bloody scene in front of them made them uncomfortable, but the strength of the white tiger was far beyond their expectations. In their opinion, facing 7 or 8 wild wolves, even if the white tiger could win, it would not be so easy. In fact, they were already prepared to take action. With their participation, they believed that this battle was almost certain. But the strength of the white tiger gave them a little surprise. Just when the bodyguards were surprised, the white tiger turned around to avoid the attack of several wolves, and with a flick of its tail, it actually whipped a wild wolf away. This time, not only did the bodyguards find something wrong, but even Zumengyo and Kinzu, who were watching the fun, felt that it was a bit exaggerated. "Damn, you are not a python, and you whipped a wild wolf away with a flick of your tail. Clean, is this white tiger really a tiger?" Zumengyo asked weakly as she looked at the giant beast galloping among the wolves. It should be." Kinzu replied embarrassedly. He was also very surprised. He didn't expect that the big bad that had been genetically modified would be so powerful. In just 2 sentences, the situation on the field changed again. The white tiger had cleanly dealt with 4 of the 8 wild wolves. The remaining 4 saw that the situation was not right and ran away while the white tiger was not paying attention. Moreover, the 4 wild wolves fled in different directions. Even though the white tiger was very fast, it was a little hesitant for a while. Which one should it deal with first? A familiar eagle cry was heard by several people present. Hearing Kinzu's whistle, the 2 harpy eagles glided past in the air. "It's Haha and Pape." Zumengyo raised her head in surprise. She hadn't seen these 2 guys in the few days since she came here and thought they had flown away. Kinzu nodded slightly and waved at the sky, and the 2 harpy eagles responded knowingly. As the eagle's cry sounded again, the 2 harpy eagles flapped their wings a few times, dived suddenly, and headed towards their target like lightning. Seeing this, the white tiger on the side also breathed a sigh of relief, exerted force on its hind legs, and rushed towards the leading wolf. This guy is the most cunning, hiding behind the wolves all the time, so that it almost didn't kill it with one blow. However, it can't be tolerated now. In the blink of an eye, the white tiger caught up with the fleeing wolf, and without giving it any chance, it pounced directly. Don't think wrongly, it was just a simple pounce. Well, that's not right, because at the moment of the pounce, the white tiger ended the life of the wolf leader. At the same time as the white tiger finished, Haha and Pape, who were flying into the sky with the 2 wolves, also released their claws at the same time. With 2 loud noises, the 2 wild wolves that had been showing off their might just now whimpered a few times on the snow, twitched a few times, and then stopped moving. Haha didn't let the white tiger continue to attack the last wild wolf, and he dived directly and repeated the action just now. Until the end of this war, the onlookers had not come back to their senses. Especially the female bodyguards. Looking at Haha and Pape, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Although they heard that their boss had 2 harpy eagles, they never thought that they could be so fierce. Those wild wolves were not small in size, and they could actually catch them and fly high. Roar. The white tiger's light roar finally woke up a few people. Looking at the white tiger who had cleaned his mouth, Kinzu was interrupted by a voice before he could be happy. "Boss, what's going on?" It was Old John and Little John who came. Both father and son were holding Remington in their hands. When they saw the situation clearly, their faces suddenly changed. "Okay, don't get excited, we're all fine." Kinzu waved his hand, called the white tiger, turned around and looked at the cattle, and said, "Let's gather the cattle first." Old John also reacted and nodded in agreement. Under the leadership of Old John, Kinzu and his men dispersed, together with more than a dozen Australian cattle, and began to drive the cattle to one place. Fortunately, there were enough people and the white tiger was in charge, so the progress was still very fast. Kinzu now also discovered the benefits of the white tiger. There was no disobedient. All he needed was a loud roar from the white tiger to ensure that the Angus cattle were obedient. Even so, Kinzu and his men were still busy for more than half an hour before they gathered the cattle into several small groups. Then after several people counted together, they finally summarized that except for a calf that was killed by a wolf's surprise attack, there was no loss of anything else. This result also made several people breathe a sigh of relief. Although the process was dangerous, the result was always good. "Old John, isn't there a fence? How come there are still wild wolves entering the ranch?" Kinzu, relieved, looked at Old John with some dissatisfaction. Were all the fences he installed in vain? Old John wiped the sweat from his forehead and explained helplessly, "Boss, the fence is not fully enclosed, and the wild wolves are not big to begin with. They can get in by just shrinking their bodies a little." Kinzu was speechless immediately. Come to think of it, it's not the kind of closed fence with fine grids. It's just a fence made of a few wires. It's okay to keep out some large animals, but small guys like wolves and foxes can still get in easily. Moreover, it's not realistic to install a fully enclosed fence for an area as large as a ranch. The cost price alone can make you collapse. Today is the 5th update, extra update for the leader who rides a pig to the grassland, 2/20 CS escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 671 Christmas Eve Shopping. On the straight and wide interstate highway, in the endless flow of cars, a Ford 750 pickup truck is so conspicuous. Under the golden sunlight, its huge body is so dazzling. But now, Dale, who was driving it, is a little helpless. Clean, why is it so congested today? Isn't it said that there is no traffic jam in the United States? In the co-pilot's seat, Zumengyo turned her head and looked at Kinzu behind her, and asked with some surprise. She couldn't help but be surprised. She has always heard people say that there are many highways in the United States. Although they have a large number of cars, there is basically no traffic jam. But what is the situation now? Kinzu didn't feel anything about this. He smiled and pinched the little face of the beautiful Zhu who came up to him, and explained, "Don't you think about what day it is today? Not only is there a traffic jam today, but there should be a party in the evening." "Party?" "Yes," Kinzu nodded. "There will be a party on Halloween, not to mention that today is Christmas Eve." "That's right, today is Christmas Eve." It was only today that he realized that he didn't seem to have prepared anything. So, he dragged Zudame and strode towards Revere under the guidance of Dale. There was no way. As a single dog, he never celebrated Christmas Eve and Christmas. It was just a very serious Christian day abroad. When it came to China, it was guided by some unscrupulous merchants and completely became Valentine's Day and Dog Abuse Day. For example, the custom of sending peace apples on Christmas Eve has never been heard of in the United States. But in the mouths of those merchants, if you don't give your girlfriend an apple on a holiday, it means you don't love her. He still remembers that there was a classmate who was unhappy because he didn't prepare apples in advance on Christmas Eve. In desperation, he had to spend 88 yuan to buy an apple from outside and give it to his girlfriend. Yes, 88 yuan, just bought an apple. Later, they broke up. Ahem, okay, back to the topic. As I said just now, Christmas, as an important Christian festival, is still very popular in Europe, and is basically on the same level as the Spring Festival in China. And the day before Christmas is commonly known as Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, people will go out of their homes, gather in the streets of small towns, or in cities, and party all night to welcome the arrival of Christmas. So Kinzu is sure that Revere will be very lively tonight, just like the last Halloween. No, it must not be like last time. Kinzu shook his head vigorously. What a joke, how much trouble has been caused on Halloween? He has decided to stay at home honestly tonight. I don't believe that you can make something happen for me at home. Kinzu thought in his heart. However, just when he made up his mind, the soft and greasy voice of the beautiful Zhu came to his ears. Clean, then let's come over tonight, okay? Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and opened his mouth, but found that he could not find an excuse to refuse this request. What's wrong? Can't you? Zhu Mengyo looked a little disappointed. Okay, how can I not do that? Kinzu saw this and hurriedly patted his chest and said with a smile, I was just thinking about what we should eat tonight. Looking at Zhu Mengyo's smiling face, Kinzu secretly made up his mind again. At worst, he could bring all the bodyguards with him. He couldn't let the beauty be sad. After crawling at a snail's pace, the Ford 750 finally squeezed into Revere and stopped at the door of the Chinese supermarket. After locking the car door, Zhu Mengyo took Kinzu's arm, followed by Dale, and the three of them walked in. Speaking of Christmas Eve, there is only one indispensable delicacy on the American table except turkey. No matter how it tastes, turkey is an indispensable dish on the American table when celebrating the festival. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. So when Kinzu entered the supermarket, he went straight to the turkey sales area. He calculated in his mind that there were more than 10 people in the ranch, including the 6 female bodyguards, himself, Zhu Mengyo, and Eva. Then take 3, 1 for old John's family, and 2 for ourselves, how about it? Kinzu looked at the 2 women beside him. Just take whatever you want. Zhu Mengyo waved her hand hurriedly. She didn't know how much to buy. Dale was even more straightforward and shook her head directly, I don't know. Kinzu shrugged, forget it, and didn't ask. So, when they walked out of the Chinese supermarket, everyone's hands were full of things. Xiaolin, why did you buy so many things? At this time, a surprised voice sounded next to them. Kinzu turned around and saw that it was the middle-aged woman who gave him the chickens. He smiled at her embarrassedly. Zhen, are you here to buy something too? Zhen nodded, yes, it's the holiday, I'm going to buy some things to take back. Looking at the girl next to Kinzu who was holding his arm and seemed to have walked out of a painting, Zhen asked tentatively, Xiaolin, is this your girlfriend? Kinzu nodded and introduced with a smile, Zhen, this is my girlfriend, Zhu Mengyo. As he spoke, he looked at Zhu Mengyo next to him, Mengyo, this is Zhen who gave me those chickens. Zhu Mengyo nodded in a daze, let go of Kinzu's arm, and greeted Zhen with a smile, Zhen, I've always heard Kinzu talk about you. He treasures the chickens you gave him and even built a nest for them. When Zhen heard this, she smiled even more. Nothing. I haven't finished the fish Xiaoqing gave me it. I've put it out to dry. Come to my house when you have time and I'll cook it for you. However, looking at the 2 people who looked like a perfect match, Zhen felt a little disappointed. After a few more pleasantries, she saw that they were holding things in their hands, so she didn't stay any longer and quickly waved her hand and left. After Zhen walked away, Zhu Mengyo smiled and took Kinzu's arm again. This aunt is very nice, Clean, you're really lucky, everyone you meet is very sincere. Kinzu raised his eyebrows proudly and shook his head narcissistically, don't you see who I am? I'm loved by everyone, flowers bloom when I see them, and cars get flat tires when I see them. Pucci. Rolling her eyes at this shameless guy, Zhu Mengyo looked at Zhen's back thoughtfully, and said, why do I feel that Zhen was a little disappointed after seeing me? A new week, please give rewards, recommendations and subscriptions, thank you all for your support. Chapter 672. Shirley's phone call. Zhen was disappointed, of course. She had wanted to match Yunya Jing and Kinzu, but Yunya Jing already had a girlfriend, and she was so beautiful. However, Kinzu didn't know this. After saying goodbye to Zhen, he took a car back to the ranch. After a short period of adaptation, the female bodyguards were already familiar with herding. Except for the need to play rock paper scissors when cleaning the cattle pen every day, they still liked herding very much. After all, not everyone can adapt to staying in the ranch doing nothing every day. As for the wild wolves, old John has already said that this is unavoidable, so they usually carry guns when herding. Moreover, there are so many Australian cattle on the scene, and a few wild wolves really can't make any waves. The reason why they were so embarrassed last time was also related to the bodyguard's lack of experience. They actually waited until the wild wolves killed a calf and disturbed the herd before they found their traces. For this, several big foreign horse bodyguards were very ashamed, so when they were herding later, although they couldn't see all directions, they could still see all directions. After returning to the villa, Eva and Zumengyo took all the things and sorted them out, so Kinzu didn't have to do anything. Therefore, Kindakyazu could lie on the sofa, enjoying the softness and toughness of the leather sofa. Of course, he was not idle. At least now he was holding a mobile phone and answering the phone. "Hi, my dear little baby, how are you playing over there? Are you happy?" On the other end of the phone was Christine, who was traveling around the world with Shirley. Their first stop was in the UK. Although Christine often went to the British Empire because of filming, it was just filming. She had only heard of many interesting places in this country, but she had never been there. This time, she finally had some free time to give herself a long vacation, so she wanted to visit all the famous attractions she had heard of before. Like the landmarks of London, Big Ben and Buckingham Palace, the charming Flemish style of Antwerp, the canals and buildings of Amsterdam, the fascinating history of Hamburg as an immigrant port, the friendly local residents of Copenhagen and the historical and cultural center that can be visited on foot, the Nordic trade cities and ports. Just thinking about it, Christine felt a little fascinated. However, that was all for the future. Now they're still in the famous Hyde Park, talking on the phone with the magical Oriental man. "Uncle, Shirley misses you." Sitting on the long bench in the park, the little girl swung her legs and acted coquettishly on the phone. For her, Uncle Keen, who brought her out of the darkness, can be compared with her mother who has always taken care of her. So after leaving her uncle for a few days, she missed him a little. Sometimes the little girl also thought that it would be great if her uncle could be with her mother, so that she could live with her mother and uncle. Kinzu certainly didn't know what the little girl was thinking. When he heard the little girl say that she missed him, his somewhat vain heart was extremely satisfied. Look, even the little girl likes him. Doesn't this prove his charm once again? After chatting with the little girl for a few words and making her giggle, Christine took the phone. "Chris, why did you leave so early? Aren't you going home for Christmas?" Kinzu asked curiously. He was really curious. It was fine that no one came to the house when he was sick, but why did this girl go out to travel instead of going home for Christmas? Leaving early, of course you can have more fun. The somewhat arrogant Hollywood star obviously didn't want to discuss these issues with Kinzu, but pretended to ask casually, "I heard that your girlfriend went to your manor to settle down." Kinzu was stunned. Which bastard spread this? How did Christine, who was traveling outside, know about it? But now is not the time to dwell on this. Listening to the slightly faster breathing in the microphone, Kinzu coughed twice and said awkwardly, "Well, that's what happened." He didn't know why he felt embarrassed. There was nothing between the two of them. Well, the landlord Keen had completely forgotten about the matter of flirting with others. Hearing Kinzu say this, Christine said with a little disappointment, and then seemed to be less interested in chatting, and handed the phone back to the little girl. The little girl didn't care about these things. She was eager to talk to her uncle. After answering the phone, she started talking. Listening to the little girl's story, Kinzu also put the matter aside and concentrated on chatting with her. The two talked on the phone for almost an hour, until Cargill on the other end was really impatient, and the little girl hung up the phone reluctantly. "Aunt Cargill, I'm not hungry, why do you have to eat so early?" The little girl pouted her lips, looking aggrieved, looking at the bad aunt who interrupted her conversation with her uncle. Cargill was also a little helpless. "You two don't think so, but I'm standing here like a fool, okay?" Without mentioning what happened to the little girl, after Kinzu hung up the phone, Zumengyo came over. "What?" "Shirley's call." Looking at the beautiful Zhu with curiosity in his eyes, Kinzu smiled and nodded. "Well, they went on a trip and are now in the UK. Isn't it Christmas tomorrow? Going on a trip at this time?" The beautiful Zhu obviously had the same idea as Kinzu. After all, in their opinion, on this festival that is similar to the Spring Festival in China, shouldn't they be with their families? Kinzu smiled and shrugged, stood up, and walked upstairs, saying, "Who knows, maybe this is the difference between Orientals and Westerners." Zumengyo didn't say anything, but stood up and followed him. She obviously knew what Kinzu was going to do. Yes, Kinzu came upstairs, there must be a reason. As for the reason, cry with a crispy eagle cry, ha, and Pate floated down from mid-air. Looking at the pair of harpy eagles in front of him that looked more majestic, Kinzu's eyes couldn't help but glance to the other side. Next to the small garden, there is a nest made of plastic and cotton, which also belongs to these two birds of prey. This nest was built a long time ago, and Kinzu prepared it for them to rest. Because no matter how fierce they are, they will get tired after standing for a long time. However, Kinzu has been busy recently and has not paid much attention to these two guys. 2 days ago, after accidentally calling out these two big guys, Kinzu went upstairs to take a look, and he made an unexpected discovery. Thanks to Chunshi Shiaoshi for his reward and support. Chapter 673 Reflection. Well, it's nothing. Kinzu just found 2 bird eggs in the harpy eagle's nest. Yes, that's right, it's bird eggs. As for why there are bird eggs at this time? You ask me, who should I ask? Anyway, Kinzu couldn't figure out the reason, but he also understood why the presence of these 2 guys was so low recently. It seems that they're starting to incubate eggs now. As for why other harpy eagles incubate eggs in June and July, but the 2 in his family are starting to incubate eggs now. Kinzu spread his hands, I'm also confused. In the afternoon, when Kinzu was thinking about what to make for dinner, the beautiful Zhu came to his side with a cup of coffee. Clean, did you forget something? Kinzu couldn't help but be a little stunned when asked by Zhu Mengyo, and asked subconsciously. What is it? Them. Zhu Mengyo pointed outside the villa, you gave others a holiday, why don't you consider them? Are you talking about Eva and Dale? What happened to them? Kinzu was still a little confused. Aren't they doing well here? Suddenly, Kinzu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the beautiful Zhu was jealous? Zhu Mengyo seemed to see through Kinzu's thoughts. She curled her lips and stretched out her 2 white and tender hands to pinch his handsome old face. You still have a father, right? It's a big holiday. Even if you don't give them a holiday, you should bring their father over to celebrate the holiday together. After hearing what Zhu Mengyo said, Kinzu suddenly realized why he had forgotten about Danny Lester, the gambler. Just like what Zhu Mengyo said, after all, he is also Eva's father. It's a big holiday, so he can't be left behind. Thinking of this, Kinzu looked at the beautiful Zhu who was staring at him in front of him, lowered his head, and kissed her pink lips. Well, what are you doing? After a long and deep kiss, the beautiful Zhu said coquettishly, panting. Kinzu chuckled twice, then asked tentatively, Mengyo, what do you think about us bringing their father over? At the end, he was afraid that Zhu Mengyo would disagree, so he continued to explain. Look, their father is the only one left at home. Even if they go back, it will be boring for 3 people to celebrate the holiday. And once they leave, there will be only 2 of us here, which will also be boring. After listening to Kinzu's explanation, the beautiful Zhu couldn't help but roll her eyes at this guy. What do you mean, only the 2 of us? Are the female bodyguards in the ranch not human beings? At this point, she paused for a moment, and then said, but what you said makes sense. It will be lonely for them to go back, and they have been living here all the time. It's not certain whether they have quills to sleep at home. Looking at Kinzu, Zhu Mengyo smiled and made the final decision. How about this, you go and pick them up, it will be more fun for everyone to get together. Hearing this, Kinzu made a victory gesture in his heart and nodded. No problem, I'll let them go and pick them up now. No, Zhu Mengyo waved her hand firmly, they will definitely not want to, you go and pick them up yourself, pick them up first, then they won't be able to object when the time comes. Kinzu thought about it and realized that it was really the case. If he asked them to pick up their dad directly, they would definitely not want to. They have no relatives or friends, and he is also his boss, who would do this? So after hesitating for a moment, Kinzu decided to do it himself. Looking at Kinzu's back as he left, Zhu Mengyo, who was lying on the sofa, sighed deeply. He came, and she could feel Kinzu's feelings for her. But in the same way, she could also feel Kinzu's feelings for others. At this time, she couldn't help but think of her mother's instructions before leaving. I can do it. Clenching her fists, the beautiful Lady Zhu reaffirmed her confidence. Moreover, she came to the United States not to seek refuge with others, but also to have her own career. Although she did not have as much cash as Kinzu, it was more than enough for her to be a small rich woman in the United States. No one likes the feeling of living under someone else's roof, so in order not to be regarded as climbing the high branch, she also made a lot of preparations. It was true that she came to find Qin, but she was not a canary who was sent to be kept by someone. Not to mention Zhu Mengyo's thoughts, Qin was now driving a Porsche Cayenne and rushing to his destination. Qin also learned about Zhu Mengyo's family after he became rich. Otherwise, do you think he is a fool? How many women want to get close to him after knowing that he is rich? If any woman can be treated like this by Qin, then he is not Qin. However, what he learned was some one-sided situations. The only thing that can be confirmed is that Zhu Mengyo's family is very unusual. As for how unusual, he also asked Zhu Mengyo, but the girl refused to say anything. Qin had no choice but to force her, right? Anyway, one thing was certain, he had found such a wife, which was definitely too high. So Qin was still very cautious and careful about his attitude towards Zhu Mengyo. If those girls came to him for his money, how could he care? As his thoughts drifted, Qin couldn't help but feel a little fortunate. It was really a blessing for him to meet a girlfriend like Zhu Mengyo. If it weren't for the sudden wealth, Qin couldn't control his swollen heart. He really wanted to put everything aside and live a quiet life with her. However, some things, once they are attached, are not so easy to wash away. Take Eva for example. Zhu Mengyo obviously already knew. But if he gave up Eva, would Zhu Mengyo feel relieved? No. Qin was sure. Because once something happened, it would always leave such an impression in people's hearts. Do you regret it? Of course there was a little, but it was all because he couldn't control his little brother. Therefore, if Zhu Mengyo didn't say anything, Qin planned to play dumb and get away with it. Anyway, before things are made clear, wouldn't it be nice for everyone to live happily together? While thinking about these messy things, Qin drove to the small farm of Eva's family according to his memory. Qin also came to this small farm to explore the way when he sent the batch of mutant Angus cattle. Although he only came that once, with Qin's good memory now, of course he would not forget it. So more than 10 minutes later, Qin's Porsche Cayenne turned off the interstate highway and drove along a ranch dirt road towards a gate in front. Extra update for the leader who rides a pig to the grassland, 3/20, chapter 674. Eliminating the barrier. Qin really had no impression of this small farm. Moreover, a place of less than 100 acres was still too small for him, who had now reached the top. For example, he had just driven in for a while when he arrived in front of the old villa. Danny Lester, who had just stopped the car and heard the sound, had already come out of the villa to greet him. When he saw that the person getting off the car was Qin, the expression on his face froze, and even his body shivered involuntarily. There was no way, the psychological stimulation he had received on the gambling boat that day was too great. Watching Franklin being sent away from his hands like that, even a person with a big heart could not bear it for a while. Although he knew afterwards that all this was just a game, the psychological shadow brought about at the time had already taken root in his heart. At this time, he suddenly saw the devil who arranged everything appear in front of him, and he didn't even have the courage to turn around and run away. "Hello, Mr. Danny, we meet again." In Danny's somewhat timid eyes, Qin gently extended his hand. "Ah, hello, hello." Danny hurriedly extended his hands and shook hands with Qin, and said cautiously, "Mr. Clean, I really haven't gone to gamble recently." Qin was stunned when he heard this, looked at his somewhat timid expression, and couldn't help laughing again. It seems that the method last time was very effective. He hasn't forgotten it after so long. Maybe this guy has a psychological trauma, right? Nodding, Qin was happy in his heart, but he remained calm on the surface, smiling and saying, "Mr. Danny, I know all this, so I came this time just to invite you to spend Christmas with us, so that you don't get bored at home alone." "Ah?" Danny was surprised and happy when he heard this, and he didn't care about being afraid anymore, and asked hurriedly, "Is it Eva and Dale's idea?" Qin shook his head, and explained to Danny's gradually disappointed expression. Although they didn't say it, I don't think they would object. At this point, Qin paused slightly, and seeing that Danny's expression had recovered a little, he said again, "Besides, I think they still love you very much. As long as you don't act stupid again in the future, they won't object." "No, never again." Danny Lester waved his hands repeatedly. His voice was a little choked at the moment he spoke, and no one knew how much mental torture he had suffered for so long. Danny Lester himself regretted what he had done before, and he couldn't figure out why he became like that. To put it in an old Chinese saying, it is to be blinded by lard. When I did it, I thought it was natural, but after I finished it, I looked back and found that it was wrong. At the time, it became endless regret. Is this something I can do? But the regret at this time is no longer useful. Not everyone can get out of that state quickly. Because it was just a Christmas, Danny Lester didn't pack too many things. After taking a change of clothes, he got on the Porsche driven by Kinzu. Europeans and Americans are not too surprised about this kind of luxury car, because according to their income level, if they save a little, they may be able to buy one in a year. For example, the most luxurious Pingo mobile phone, if sold in the United States, it is only a few $100 per unit. But what about in China? It is directly 6,000 or 7,000 per unit. Moreover, this is still under the condition of unequal income on both sides. For workers who earn a few thousand yuan a month, in the United States, it is easy for them to buy several Pingo phones a month. But in China, it is still very difficult to buy one every few months. Of course, those wealthy local tycoons and those workplace elites are not included. Danny was very honest in the car, and he didn't even dare to look at Kinzu. He just looked straight ahead, as if there was something dirty on the windshield. When they returned to the ranch, it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Eva and Zumengyo had already started preparing dinner. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Eva, who was washing vegetables with Zumengyo in the kitchen, couldn't help but stick her head out and complained. "Boss, where have you been? You said you were going to cook, why are you here at this time?" At this point, Eva couldn't say anything more, and her hands covered her mouth involuntarily, muttering, "Dad?" Zumengyo heard her whisper, smiled and patted her suddenly soft shoulders, and said with a smile, "You can't have a holiday on Christmas, so Keen went to pick up your father, and everyone will spend Christmas together. Don't you mind?" "No, no." Eva waved her hands in surprise and said incoherently, I don't mind, anything is fine." "Okay, go out and take a look." Zumengyo smiled and pushed her. "Yeah," Eva nodded, looking at Zumengyo very seriously. "Sister Mengyo, thank you." Zumengyo was stunned, and just when she wanted to say something, Eva had already walked out of the kitchen, leaving her no chance to speak. What does this little girl mean? Eva, who came outside, looked at Danny, who was a little excited, and opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. Danny, under Kinzu's eyes, took a few quick steps and said excitedly, "Eva, it's Dad's fault. I made you suffer in the past. Dad promises that he will never go to gamble again." If Danny had said these words before, Eva would not believe a word. But now it's different. After Kinzu's blow, Danny has become very honest recently. For so long, he has never left the small farm. So now he said this, Eva immediately believed most of it, and her heart softened. Looking at the scene of the father and daughter understanding each other, Kinzu shrugged his shoulders, blew a kiss to the beautiful Zhu, who leaned out of the kitchen to check the situation, and then turned and walked out of the villa. "What are you going to do?" Of course, to deal with the remaining one. He didn't want to see another drama of father and daughter understanding in front of so many people before dinner. Moreover, the most important point is that if the father and daughter understand each other, then everyone will be happy and celebrate the festival happily. But what if they don't understand each other? At the time, wouldn't the situation be embarrassing? Therefore, in order to prevent this possibility from happening, Kinzu wants to nip them in the bud. Chapter 675 Christmas Eve Dinner. When Kinzu found Dale, it was almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She was preparing to drive the cattle back to the cattle pen with the cowboys. After meeting, Kinzu did not say anything nonsense and directly pulled her back, which made the female bodyguards on the side very curious. However, when Dale left, there was one less person, so they had no time to think about it. Fortunately, the situation did not develop to the worst place. After the father and daughter met, there was no dissatisfaction. Although Dale's own personality is limited and she will not be too enthusiastic, it can be clearly seen from her beautiful eyes with a smile that this cold and beautiful female bodyguard is still very happy. Seeing this, Kinzu was somewhat relieved. He ignored them and walked into the kitchen to start busy preparing dinner. Moreover, he had to call the female bodyguards who had been busy for several days to have dinner together in the evening, so his workload was still quite large. There was no way. On the one hand, because they basically had no relatives, there was nothing to do in the apartment alone during the holidays. Secondly, Kinzu and his friends alone could not experience the festive atmosphere. In addition, these female bodyguards were not the type of girls who looked like petite girls. Although they were all hot and curvy, they had a big appetite. Well, thanks to Eva and Zumengyo, the two good wives, they did not think of letting Kinzu work alone, so the dinner was still very fast. The turkey was washed and drained, stuffed with breadcrumbs, and coated with brightly colored seasonings, and then sent directly to the oven. The turbot, which looked extremely fat, was washed and seasoned, and then steamed directly in the pot. As for the lobster, which was nearly 1 meter long, it was washed and placed on a plate, waiting for Qin Zhu to deal with it. Although there were many foreigners today, in addition to the necessary roast turkey dinner, he still planned to prepare a table of Chinese food. There was no way, it was a big festival, and Western food and the like tasted completely unpleasant. Especially when Europeans and Americans eat, they are used to eating by themselves, eating alone facing the plate. Well, although Qin Zhu knows that this is for cleanliness and hygiene, he is just not used to it. He is used to eating in a big pot, and it is really difficult for him to eat alone now. Therefore, under his arrangement, the delicious feast with color, fragrance and taste soon filled the not too small dining table in the restaurant. The most common ones are mapo tofu, fried pork with peppers, flavored shrimps, sweet and sour pork, Westlake vinegar fish, etc. The more complicated ones are three-thread fish, green snail shrimp, dongpo pork, Xianglu river eel, etc. However, river eels here are not easy to find, so Qin Zhu simply used sea eels instead. Well, plus roast turkey, steamed turbot, butter-baked lobster, a table of many kinds of food, not only stunned a group of foreigners, but also surprised Zhu Mengyo, who knew Qin Zhu very well. "Qin, how can you cook so many dishes?" Looking her lover up and down, the beautiful lady Zhu asked suspiciously. The performance last time was okay, although the cooking skills were not bad, but it was not so amazing. Now Qin Zhu gave her the feeling that there was nothing he couldn't cook in the 8 major cuisines. Facing the doubts of his beautiful wife, the landlord Qin acted very calmly and looked at her with a pitiful look. "There is no way. I can't get used to Western dishes, so I had to start learning from the recipes and cook for myself every day." At this point, the landlord Qin also sighed falsely. "Alas, my life is really hard." Hearing Qin Zhu say this, Zhu Mengyo immediately believed most of it. Yes, if you can't get used to Western food, isn't it a simple thing to learn to cook Chinese food by yourself? Besides, there are a lot of recipes on the internet now, so it's not surprising that Qin Zhu can cook so many dishes. Of course, what she didn't notice was that Qin Zhu said all these words in Chinese. Moreover, the two were still in the kitchen, and Qin Zhu's voice was not loud, so he was able to get away with it. Otherwise, Eva would definitely be the first to come out and sell him out. "Is this shameless? I usually cook, how come you cook in the blink of an eye?" However, all this is based on something that does not exist, so Eva is still honestly cleaning up outside. As everything was over, the female bodyguards were all present, and with Qin Zhu's order, everyone began to attack like a whirlwind. Foreigners don't like Chinese food. Chinese food is too greasy. Chinese food is too heavy. No. In front of Qin Zhu, all of this does not exist. These delicacies are all cooked with ingredients grown by spiritual energy, and even those fish and shrimps have enjoyed the added attributes of the fishing ground. Therefore, these ingredients are not only of high nutritional value, but also of first-class taste. It can be said that any chef who comes here, even if he cooks these ingredients directly with water, the taste will not be much worse. The dinner completely convinced these foreigners. Especially the female bodyguards, who looked at Qin Zhu with even more admiration. Their boss was really amazing. Not only was he so rich, but he was also so good at cooking. Whoever married him would be so happy. Not to mention the fantasies of the female bodyguards, even Danny, who had a smile on his face today, couldn't help but look at Qin Zhu with a strange look. It can be said that Danny respected and feared Qin Zhu. The respect was that Qin Zhu had so much wealth, a net worth of billions of dollars, which was not much even in the United States. The fear was still due to the big gamble. Seeing the money that should belong to him being given away bit by himself, it caused him a certain psychological shadow. Thinking of the gamble, even now, Danny still shuddered involuntarily. It's terrible. However, unlike her father's thoughts, Eva's feelings about Qin Zhu are really getting better and better. It is said that to capture a man's heart, you must first capture his stomach. This sentence is not only useful for women, but also for foreign women. In families here, men cook. That is basically impossible. Except for those hotels and restaurants, generally speaking, no man will cook. So, when such a rich, kind, and especially gentle man appeared in front of her, she surrendered gorgeously. A gorgeous dinner ended with everyone reluctant to leave. After several female bodyguards helped clean up the scene, a loud doorbell rang at the door. Fin d'est capture lo much as great as Pelagahasta el final. No esse olveden didal like busgasms contendo exclusivo ixo in medito. Si scribata news teropatrian. Recuerda, carda like, si scripsino donaking nos anima a continue. Greaters a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.